Welcome back to the Budget and Appropriations Committee. We are now moving into the Chief Administrative Officer, and we are going to go straight into the presentation at this time.
Got it. Thank you so much. So good afternoon, Chairwoman McCray, Council President Cohen, and members of the Baltimore City Council. For the record, I am Faith P. Leach, and I have the honor and privilege of serving the residents of the City of Baltimore as the City Administrator. Before I begin, I want to recognize the more than 13,000 public servants who keep Baltimore moving forward every single day. They are the heart of the government, and they are the very best of our city. In the wake of the heartbreaking passing of Deputy Mayor Tony Barksdale and Mr. Gregory Turnipseed of the Department of Transportation, we witnessed the extraordinary character of Baltimore's workforce as city employees showed up for one another and for the residents they serve with strength, grace, and humanity, reminding us that public service is not just a profession, but a calling. I want to take this moment to honor every public servant we lost this year. In moments of loss, the city relies on public servants like Michael W. Heinlein of the Baltimore City Fire Department and this year's Richard Ladinsky Award recipient. Mr. Heinlein's steadfast leadership reminds us what public service truly means, showing up in moments of crises, leading with integrity, and continuing to serve with humanity and purpose. This budget reflects that same spirit. It is a budget that is grounded in service, accountability, and hope for Baltimore's future. The budget is centered on the key tenets of Baltimore's continued progress: people, process, and technology. This budget continues a record investment in our workforce by fully implementing a new salary scale for ASME and CUB, resulting in an approximately 20% average pay increase over the next 3 years, assessing and redesigning antiquated agency processes, which you will hear more about when I talk about our performance framework, and upgrading, and in some cases, stabilizing the systems that undergirds government operations. This afternoon, I will provide an overview of the FY27 recommended budget, review the morality and key organizational changes included in the FY27 budget, speak to the work of the City Administrator's Office, address long-term operational and fiscal initiatives, and of course, I've left ample time to answer questions at the conclusion of my presentation. The next several slides will highlight key investments in the management framework supporting the administration's work to deliver measurable results for Baltimore residents. The recommended budget totals $5 billion, including a $2.8 billion general fund budget, just over $1 billion in capital budget investments, and supports more than 14,000 positions that help operationalize the mayor's vision and deliver core services to Baltimore City residents. You all have seen this slide, but as a reminder, we balanced a $12 million budget gap by identifying $17.8 million in agency savings, including reducing reliance on contractors and bringing more work in-house. $5.5 million in citywide savings initiatives. We invested about $11.2 million into targeted budget enhancements, which is how we closed that $12.1 million gap. The fiscal year FY27 budget advances the mayor's strategic priorities through targeted investments. Recently, we released a refreshed mayor's action plan, which serves as the city's strategic plan, and introduced a new pillar: modernizing public infrastructure. Mayor Scott's FY27 budget enhances public safety by investing $4.35 billion to sustain violence prevention efforts in the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, and $12 million to replace the CAD system. It prioritizes youth by providing $6.5 million in funding for 8,500 summer jobs through YouthWorks. It supports clean and healthy communities through $60 million in BPW facility upgrades, funding for new graffiti crews, and funding for the new limited curbside composting pilot. It advances equitable economic development with a $15 million investment in an economic development revolving loan fund. Enforces responsible stewardship of city resources by including $1.3 million to sustain broadband and digital equity and enhancing grants management coordination. And finally, modernizes infrastructure by investing $1 billion in the capital budget, including a historic $337 million from local capital sources. This more than doubles the annual average of the last 20 years. The next section of this presentation will review the city government structure as well as the mayoralty, budget, and organization. This slide is just a reminder of the city's organizational structure. The mayor provides leadership and direction of the city government. I provide day-to-day management of government agencies, and the chief of staff leads the mayor's office. Now, I want to briefly address the growth of the mayoralty budget. This budget supports far more than the operations of my office, the deputy mayors who are here with me today, and the chief of staff who is also here. It also funds several offices that this administration, alongside members of this council, have consistently prioritized, championed, and in many cases, formally established through legislation. In the FY27 budget, the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs will transition from the mayoralty to become a standalone agency, while the Office of Infrastructure Development will be dissolved with its 6 positions reassigned across other agencies. With that context, I'd like to turn to the primary drivers of the mayoralty budget. First are the requirements that must be funded due to legislation. In 2019, this council and the people of Baltimore overwhelmingly supported the creation of a city administrator. My office is made up of the city administrator, the deputy city administrator, the deputy mayors, and their requisite staff. Next is the Mayor's Office of Performance and Innovation. This administration was proud to work with Councilmember Conway and other sponsors of this legislation to codify Baltimore's industry-leading city staff office and increase staffing to fulfill the responsibilities of that legislation. We were also so proud to secure a grant to create an innovation team to support our vacant strategy as well as police recruitment. We received grant funding for 7 positions to support this work. In 2022, under the leadership of now Council President Cohen and VP Middleton, the council legislated the creation of what is now the Mayor's Office of Older Adult Affairs and Advocacy to support older adults across the city, and we've been happy to stand up that office. Now I want to talk about the office established to advance the mayor's priorities. The Office of African American Male Engagement was created under a prior administration, but is a critical piece of the mayor's public safety strategy and leads our Squeegee Collaborative. Additionally, the Mayor's Office of Overdose Response was established to support individuals suffering from substance use disorder and is entirely funded by settlement funds, not taxpayer dollars. And finally, the Mayor's Office of Arts, Culture, and Entertainment supports cultural events and festivals like Artscape and AFRAM, supports nightlife and entertainment venues, and leads efforts like the Graffiti Task Force and our citywide mural program. As you can see from this slide, and if you also turn to page 360 in the budget book under Service 125, Executive Direction and Control, there are 76 general funded positions that directly support the mayor and 7 grant funded positions that support the innovation team included in the service for a total of 83 positions. The other services that make up the mayoralty include the 6 offices I outlined above. The next section of my presentation will focus on our performance and accountability framework. In FY26, my office expanded operational capacity to strengthen accountability, oversight, and agency performance. These changes have allowed my office to enhance focus on operational agencies and capital budgets through the creation of the Deputy Mayor for Operations role, which moved operational agencies like DOT, DPW, DGS, and now BCRP under one deputy mayor. Improve audit tracking and grants coordination, which are now under the Deputy City Administrator. The Deputy City Administrator has implemented quarterly check-ins with agencies to follow up on biennial performance audit and single audit findings. The DCA has compiled, centralized, and tracked more than 80 findings across more than 20 audit reports issued by the Departments of Audit since FY 2022. The next slides will focus on how performance management is put into practice across the city government. The city's performance management framework is designed to better align strategic planning, agency operations, and accountability across city governments. I'll discuss each of these components in the following slides. The Mayor's Action Plan establishes the city's strategic priorities. It builds on the administration's first-term progress and introduces a 6-pillar, as I've mentioned, called focused on modernizing public infrastructure. We released a refreshed version of the Mayor's Action Plan a few weeks ago, and this is our guiding strategic plan for the city. Agency performance plans translate the Mayor's Action Plan into measurable agency-level goals, performance indicators, or KPIs, and service delivery targets. We're going through a process over the summer to overhaul agency KPIs and align them to the Mayor's Action Plan. Soon we will release an interactive dashboard where agencies and residents can track our progress over time. CityStat continues to serve as the city's primary operational accountability and performance management tool. In calendar year 2025, CityStat convened 116 meetings across 15 stats and released their annual report. That work contributed to measurable operational improvements across multiple agencies and service areas, including a 50% reduction in illegal dumping requests routed through DHCD's Special Investigations Unit following 311 workflow reforms, a 48-hour turnaround in lien sheet processing down from a high of nearly 30 days, which is tracked through the finance stat, continued reductions in violent crime, including a 79% decrease in juvenile homicide victims from 2024 to 2025, which we monitor through youth violence stat, and an increase in heat illness prevention training across agencies, which is measured through workplace safety stat, just to name a few. Tiger teams are used to address complex operational challenges that require coordinated actions across multiple agencies. In 2025 and early 2026, Tiger teams were launched to support a range of operational priorities, including zero waste implementation, where a pilot was conducted to track and log recycling contamination through routeware. Forestry backlog, where BCRP reduced the tree removal backlog from 1,276 to 214 work orders, and the maintenance pruning backlog from 1,865 to 351 work orders in the last year. And parking enforcement, where we piloted a new TEO app built in-house to optimize TEO route times. We also have Tiger teams focused on traffic calming, streetlight inventory, street sweeping, and code enforcement. Now I want to spend just my following closing slides just talking about the future. While much of this hearing focuses on the day-to-day operations and FY27 investments, this administration is also planning beyond a single fiscal year. In December 2025, the administration released Securing Baltimore's Future, the city's updated 10-year financial plan, which we talked about earlier today. The plan acknowledges a difficult fiscal reality. Without intervention, Baltimore faces a projected cumulative structural deficit of more than $1 billion. Several elements of this strategy are already reflected in the FY27 budget. This slide just reiterates our work to modernize the city's infrastructure, strengthen service delivery, and revamp agency performance measures. And this slide focuses on the 4 areas that guide my office's work. The first is improving city service delivery, which includes modernizing our fleet and facilities, improving technology integration across systems, optimizing routes and operational processes, and completing staffing studies. Second is strengthening human capital and organizational culture. People will always remain our most important resource. We are focused on modernizing salary structures, creating growth and advancement pathways for employees, and standardizing HR processes. Third is reforming city systems. This work includes modernizing financial systems, improving procurement processes, and strengthening grants management practices. And fourth is strengthening customer service and community engagement. This includes establishing citywide customer service standards, which we will begin developing in partnership with city government employees this summer and fall. Council members, what you have before you is a responsibly balanced budget developed during a period of continued global economic uncertainty. This budget reflects an administration that is not simply managing government day to day, but actively working to strengthen how government functions over the long term. Importantly, this work is grounded in the understanding that Baltimore cannot cut its way to long-term success. We must continue building a city government that is modern, that is responsive, and that is financially resilient and capable of delivering high-quality services consistently and effectively. It also means remaining willing to make difficult decisions while staying focused on measurable outcomes and being responsible stewards of public resources. The progress we have made over the last several years is real, but we also recognize there is still significant work ahead of us. This budget represents a commitment to invest in our neighborhoods, support our workforce, protect our progress, and create opportunity for every Baltimorean. With that, I am happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Leach. We're going to start with Council President Cohen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. CAO, it is good to see you. Thank you for your work on behalf of our city. I want to start out on a positive note. One of the things I've appreciated about your leadership is the continued use of innovation, and shout out to our innovation team, as well as some of the partnerships that we have with our local colleges and universities, particularly our HBCUs, when we think about how to backfill positions. I'm gonna have two lines of questions, one related to the amount of contracting out that we do, and then one related to vacancy and overtime. And I'm gonna start with vacancy and overtime. We just held a hearing in this committee, and as we noted, the number of vacant positions funded in the budget has decreased notably, and I appreciate the administration's effort in this regard. However, we still have extensive overtime in some departments, and we have had to enact tens of millions of dollars in year-end supplementals to cover expenditures that were incurred over and above the budget amounts approved by the council. In many cases, the overspending for which we needed year-end supplementals was for overtime. Troublingly, during the recent hearing, Police Chief Worley told us that he knew the police department was going to exceed its budget the day he received the budget. In other words, it was clear from day one that the budget was too low. And Fire Chief Wallace indicated the fire department was in the same situation. This is a problem, and let me be clear, I am grateful for the extraordinary gains we are making on public safety. The women and men of the Baltimore Fire and Police Departments deserve our extreme gratitude for the work they're doing. But for the budget process to hold integrity, we need to know that when we pass a budget, our agencies are going to operate within their allocations for the entire fiscal year. As such, our budgets need to reflect the true costs of providing essential services, including police, fire, and all other agencies. In calendar 2025, the fire department incurred 705,000 overtime hours at a cost of nearly $45 million, while the police department incurred 875,000 overtime hours at a cost of nearly $63.6 million. Both departments required large year-end supplementals to fill budget gaps. Let me ask, does the FY27 budget account fully for the anticipated overtime costs at fire, police, and all of our departments? Or do you anticipate that even with enactment of this budget, we will require year-end supplementals at the end of the fiscal year to cover overages, including overtime costs?
Thank you for that question, and I was happy to address a lot of those concerns during that hearing, where I responded specifically to the fire department and the police department overtime. So I want to talk about this from a couple of angles. One, I want to reference the 10-year financial plan, which specifically talks about public safety agencies and how we bring our public safety agencies in line. So there are a couple of strategies that are outlined in the 10-year financial plan, which was released in December. There are a couple of components to, I would say, right-sizing the budget for our public safety agencies. One, there is and will continue to be an evaluation of the proper staffing models, which we will do in partnership and through negotiations with our unions to ensure that we have the right staffing model for the city of Baltimore. The other, which is reflected in this year's budget, actually, if you look at the fire department budget, and we can call out the specific service line, the fire department's overtime budget went from, and the team can correct me if I'm wrong, about $13 to $14 million in last year. And this year, I want to say it's about $34 million in FY27. Again, the team can correct my math there, because there were a couple of things that we did. So with fire in particular, we actually moved their vacancy savings into their overtime line, which when you look at BPD generally moves their vacancy savings into their overtime line. We were not doing that with the fire department. And so this year's budget reflects an overtime budget of, again, it doubles the overtime budget, if not more than doubles the overtime budget. The other thing, too, that happened in the fire department's budget, as well as in BPD's budget.
Sorry, could you just run that last point back?
I'm happy to.
Didn't quite compute in my head. Why'd we double the
We
overtime?
doubled their overtime budget. So when you look at the fire department budget, and again, the team, Bob, if you can pull that service line, you will see that their overtime budget increased from about 14 million, and I think it is 34 million is what I last saw. I have it in my notes and in my book. So it has been doubled. But again, we'll confirm those numbers for you. The other thing that was done for our public safety agencies, we are seeing record recruitment, which is something that we all should be celebrating. Because there was a time where this council and the community talked about like the challenges that we had in filling both, fire, EMS, as well as police officer positions. We've been having the largest recruit classes that this city has seen in decades over the past few years. So what we have done is we've now accounted for the cost of those recruits. So we created a recruit classification or a trainee classification. We funded that because what was happening is we were using the overtime, or excuse me, the vacancy savings for fire and police to pay for those recruits who were in training, but those recruits weren't in the field. So that meant that we had to back pay or backfill that with overtime. So instead of backfilling with overtime, we're now gonna have overtime to fund those staff that are doing the work that the trainees will eventually do. And then we put money in the budget and created trainee positions so that fire and police can pay for those trainees out of those the trainee positions and the trainee budget. Again, many of these things are outlined as a part of our 10-year financial plan. Given the complexity of how you operate and manage public safety agencies in particular, it is going to be a multi-pronged approach, and it will likely, especially in the case of fire, take us a couple of years to really get to right size that budget and bring it more in line. But we think with some of the investments we've made in this year's budget that we are closer than ever, especially in the fire department. Also in fire, we funded battalion techs. So the chief was providing, this came out of the Stricker Street report. So for 2, if not 3 fiscal years, the chief was providing the battalion tech program. It was not funded, it was unbudgeted. So this year we invested in the fire battalion program, I wanna say $2.3 million. Again, that also was being paid with unbudgeted overtime. And then also contractual EMS services. During the pandemic, we provided, we supplemented EMS with contractors. That wasn't budgeted for. We have moved funding for that, actually being paid through the opioid restitution fund. So again, I just wanted to outline a couple of the big components that are contributing to the fire and police overtime and some of the strategies that we put in place to rein that in.
I appreciate that, and do appreciate the complexity of managing large city public safety agencies. I do want to ask, though, a really direct, hopefully simple question, which is, at what point will we discontinue the widespread practice of having to use supplemental budgets to cover overtime and vacancies?
So just to be clear for the general public at home, there is likely never to be a time where a city will not have to provide a supplemental budget. So anytime that there is money that is not within the budget, so we could receive a grant from the federal government, we could receive a grant from philanthropy, any money that was not included in the budget would have to go through a supplemental budget process. That's how we are transparent about money that's coming in, money that's coming out. So it is unlikely that that practice will end. Now, to your specific question about overtime in particular, again, we're going to be as aggressively working with the fire department, with the police department, because we do think that there is an ability to bring in our overtime costs. We actually saw the police department early on in the mayor's tenure in the 2020, 2021, 2022, they were able to remain pretty well within budget. And so now I think there is an opportunity for us to work closely with the police department, as well as, again, we talked about fire and the fire investments. And I am hopeful that we will reduce the size of the supplementals that are coming before the council, especially for overtime for fire and police, until we get to a point where we no longer have to bring them. So that is my work that we will do, but I cannot commit that you will never see a supplemental because it is the practice of any municipal government.
And within reason, right? I mean, any government is going to have some degree, there's always going to be within any large business entity or government, there's going to be some amount of need to move money around. But I think, again, what this council has reiterated last year, this year, and in the hearing we both referenced, is a true desire to move away from that as an institutionalized practice and to really end the budget season with a budget where within parameters, within a certain degree, we are all clear on how much an agency has. And I think that is what I'm going to continue to drive toward, is we all have a clear sense at the end of this process in June how much an agency has, and that that agency has to respect those boundaries, because that is what the mayor and city council have set out for them. Thank you, Madam CA, and appreciate you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I want to ask a question about Tiger teams related to, specifically to forestry. How long is the Tiger team been meeting for the forestry department?
So the Forestry Tiger Team, so we launched Tiger Teams at the end of December, early January, so at least for the past 5 months. And D'Artagnan, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct. We launched the Forestry Tiger Team at the end of January, and it's been running since then.
What measurable results have we had since January that you guys can point to specifically for the Forestry Tiger Team?
With forestry, this Tiger Team started off with 3 major issues. The first was the procurement process within the Department of Recreation and Parks. They've recently gotten some internal fiscal staff, and so the team has been partnering with BCRP on processes for expediting their procurement operation. The second thing was the communication and messaging around what the public should expect when it comes to trimming trees and grinding stumps. So there's a public messaging campaign around that as well. The third is following the backlog when it comes to service requests associated with forestry. We've saw drops in the thousands between September and now based on our recent data. And then the last is technology tools to make the operation within Rex and Park more efficient, specifically routing the service requests, combining this, creating one sort of tool that the team can use to manage the service requests and city work orders. Today, the team has to manually route tickets, and they have to do operations outside of the system in order to plan their work for forestry. And so designing a more optimal technology solution for managing their work is also in scope for the Tiger Team.
And I can give you specific numbers as well as some of the drops that we've seen. So,
CAO, give me just 1 second. I want to make sure that I have all 4 points. I had procurement, I had communication, I was missing number 3, in technology tools. What was the third point again? And I think that's what the CAO is going to speak to.
The first is the procurement process.
Right.
The second is the public education campaigns, the routing and management of their work orders. Those were the top 3. If I mentioned the 4th one, it has escaped me. But those are the domains that we have been focusing on for the Forestry Tiger Team. So public education, procurement, and effective routing of their service requests as part of the operation.
And CAO, you're going to get into how all of that has translated since January into measurable results.
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So when we look at September 1st through 2025 through May 25th of 2026, there were 5,273 forestry work orders that were completed. If we compare that with the same time, so September of 24 to May of 25, there were 3,663 work orders completed. So we've seen an increase in the amount of work orders that's being processed over time. Specifically, the maintenance prune in September, we had 1,865 in the backlog. And then currently we have open SRs 263. And tree removal is similar, 1,276 as of the September 1st, 2025. And the number that have been open since September of 25 is 176. We have a lot more work to do on stump removal.
If I focus on tree, I want to make sure I heard you. You said 1,276. That was the backlog for September 25. Did you state that the new requests that have came in is 176?
Yes, I actually have a slide. I wish I could show you. So I'm gonna walk through the numbers. So let's talk about tree pruning. In the backlog, we had 1,865. That was as of September 1st, 2025. In the current backlog, as of May 19th, there are 361. Of the 361, 263 are new requests that have come in.
I'm just going to repeat this. I want to make sure I got this. Thanks everyone for your patience. 9/25, 9/120, yeah, just say September 25. We had a backlog of 1,865. We're talking about tree pruning,
Yes.
right? May of this year, we reduced that backlog to 361.
Yes,
Okay. And 263 of those are new.
yes.
Okay. Can I get the numbers for the tree removals?
Yes.
Thank
Tree removal, 1,276 as of September 1st, 2025. The backlog as of May 19th, 2026 is 214, and the new SRs opened are 176.
And you would attribute that to the changes that have come with the Tiger team?
Yes, we also put an additional $1 million into this service as well to help reduce the backlog.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm going to go to Councilman Schleifer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, CAO. Thank you for all that you do across the city. I look forward to some of those efforts coming up to my district in the years to come. When we were discussing the city administrator position on the council years ago and passing legislation, which I supported, I think it's an important thing for the city to have. One of the things that we were told, and obviously this predates you because it wasn't legislation, it wasn't law then, was that the mayor's budget was going to, the team was basically going to part in two. You were going to have, the mayor's side where there are certain functions, and then the CAO side, which was going to be more of operational functions, which is what it is today. However, we were told back then that the budget was essentially the staff was going to basically be divided up into these two different channels. What we've seen over the past handful of years since it's taken effect is that basically there's two mayor's offices created in one, which is why there's so many more staff members than ever before under mayorality, as well as the budget has skyrocketed from years ago to now. And so is this the way it's supposed to be, or are both parts of the agency the right size, or is there supposed to be some consolidation and reduction in the mayor's office, both budget and staffing levels?
Sure, thank you so much for that question. So my presentation, there was a slide that actually outlined this along with the graphic. So currently, when you look at executive direction and control, which is both the chief of staff as well as the city administrator, it's the entire it's the direct staff that support the mayor. There are 76 general fund positions, and when you add the additional 7 positions that are for the I team, you come up with a total of 83 positions. There were 83 positions in the mayor's mayor's office in FY20. There were 74 in FY21. There were 76 in FY22. There were 83 in FY23. There were 102 in FY24, then 105 in FY25, then 67 in FY26, and then FY27, we're back at 76. So in FY27, in executive direction, which is, again, the city administrator, the chief of staff, as well as the mayor, there are 76 general fund positions, which is less than what was there in FY20. And I
So-
can speak to specifically about a city administrator's office and how that should function and the staff that is needed for that. So any functioning chief administrative officer, if you look at any of the surrounding counties, most of the counties in the state of Maryland have chief administrative officers. I want to say it's 83, if not 86% of the municipalities of the cities across the country have a city manager, a chief administrative officer, or a person in a similar position. And they do require staff to support them. And so what we have done in this administration is the staff, we've always had deputy mayors, or in some cases, the titles were deputy chief of staffs. Those are not new roles. There is a new position, which existed under a previous administration, which is the deputy mayor for operations, which was new when I came in. I created that new role. But currently, we have funding for the deputy mayors. They have very small offices. If you compare us to, other major cities, the top 25 cities in size in the country, having a deputy mayor of operations have a staff of 5 is unheard of, or a deputy mayor of economic development having a staff of 6, or a city administrator with a staff of 8. So again, I think our staffing is comparable to what we see in other jurisdictions, and it's actually lower than it was in FY20.
So thank you. And by the way, just for the record, I want to state that I think, every dollar spent on the chief of staff is a dollar well spent. He's been doing great work. But I'm looking at the budget book here, and obviously I appreciate you outlining that in your presentation because it is a been of great discussion, but the budget does say 134 positions under mayoralty and $28.5 million. So I'll just, instead of debating it right here on the floor, perhaps maybe we can get a committee request of a breakdown of these 134 positions by function. And then if you don't mind, since you were comparing it to when this administration took office, if you can also provide the list of the breakdown of the far less positions and the money and just show where that was so that we could compare apples to apples, because obviously that's what I think you were trying to differentiate the functions there, because what it certainly looks to me is that there's these 2 channels and there's these big staffs, and I'm trying to figure out what all these people do. So if we can make that a committee request,
Sure.
that'd be great.
I'm happy to talk through it again. So if you look in the budget book on page 360, which I think you're probably there, if you look under Service 125, that's where you see executive direction and control. And so what you see in executive direction and control, you see 83 positions there. Those were the numbers that were listed on the slide. So the numbers that I went over all the way back to FY20 are it's the mayor's office. It's executive direction and control. So it follows exactly what's in the budget book. Now, what I also explained on that same slide is that there are 6 offices, and 3 of those offices are legislated. That is the mayor's office of older adults. There is the city stat, or office of performance and innovation, where there was legislation around the city stat program. And then the other office that is legislated is, remind me, BC Moore? Huh? I forget off the top, it's on my slide.
Well, if you don't know the name of it, we could just scrap that out of the budget. So if you can just let us know which one that was, we can.
Okay, sure. But again, so we have the legislative offices that I mentioned, and then we have the ones that are based off of the mayor's priorities. Oh, MEMA is legislated, for example, right? Like that is the office that was just before us that I think the council was asking questions about their funding. So there are offices that are mayoral offices that are legislated and required, and then there are the ones that are discretionary that I mentioned above.
So I don't want to debate it now.
Oh my goodness, so it's my office. The one that I missed that you said we should scrap is my office.
Did we just cut your office? I'm sorry about that. All right, so I take that back. We shouldn't cut your entire office, just some of it, and I'll let you know which parts later on. But so we still get to, and I don't want to debate it now because I do want to get to my second question and be respectful to the committee. But again, and I'll break this down, but I would like if you can provide a breakdown from the budget year that you guys inherited from Mayor Jack Young that first year when you guys took office to now, if you can show these positions, because whether or not they're categorized under different functions, it's still, I want
Sure.
to compare the apples to apples. My second question
Vice
is,
Chair, before you get into your second question, what is your deadline or timeline for this request?
whatever the team thinks is reasonable. They're saying it's in the budget books, and so I don't want to hash through that right now, but I mean, I assume in the
CEO
next few
Leach,
days.
what is a reasonable timeline?
So I provided this information in my slide deck. So there's a slide that mentions all of those, that provides those numbers going back to FY20.
So
is that the request?
So a day?
I mean,
To email
if that
to email the
suffices for-
slide? Okay.
Yeah, if that suffices for, to be responsive to the committee request.
Okay, because I'm trying not to go down the rabbit hole.
Of course.
Because I want to get to my second question, but those positions were not there in the budget all those years ago. And so even though they're
What positions?
like, there was not you're including a bunch of different functions here, and you're saying this is what makes up the total of 134 positions under the mayoral control. So what has happened in the past 7 years is there's a lot of new agencies and new functions and new groups that were created, and every mayor does it. It's not unique to this administration. But nonetheless, under the mayoral control, now versus, before this administration took office, there's a significant differential in positions, ones that did not exist. So it's not like we're looking at it and saying, oh, okay, this one office was under, a different agency, and we consolidated this function under housing and this function under planning and this function under DPW. These are a lot of new positions that were created by the administration, so they are administrative functions. But what I will do, if you don't want to provide it, it's fine. I'll just pull, and I'll save it for my second round of questions. But I'll go back to the budget book there, and I'll give you the specifics that I'm talking about.
Sure. And just to clarify, there were only 2 offices that were new, that were established by this mayor. That was the Office of Overdose Response, which is fully funded by opioid restitution dollars and does not include any taxpayer dollars, and the Office of Arts, Culture, and Entertainment. The Office of African American Male Engagement was established under a prior administration and has existed for over a decade. The city administrator was also, it was established by then Council President Scott, and he did stand it up. So I'll give him 3 there. And then the Older Adult Affairs, again, that was legislated. City Stat was also legislated. So I just wanted to clarify that it is not that the mayor went out and created 6 brand new offices. Some of those offices existed beforehand. He created, we'll give him 3. And then the others were created by and legislated by the council.
Okay. My next question is, there's approximately $400 million in new spending in this year's budget that equates to about an 8% increase over last year's, which is well above the current level of service, annual funding that we typically see. Can you just explain to me on a high level why we don't have 1% of that new spending to put towards one of the most important things that it could go towards, which is reducing property taxes in the city, along with your office's 10-year plan, which calls for a 2% reduction. We heard in the first hearing of the day that every percent would be $2 million. And so the 2 cents, if you were to deliver on the 10-year plan and reduce it by 2 pennies, that would cost $4 million. So that's 1% of the new spending. So can you explain to me why there's not $4 million out of the $400 million that can go towards that 10-year plan?
I'm happy to. So we should be very clear about what makes up that $400 million. There's not $400 in new spending. So what makes up that $400 million, there's about $150 million, again, the team can correct my math here, that in one-time local funding sources for capital. So again, those are not recurring sources that we would be able to use on property tax reduction, but I'm gonna get to property tax reduction in a moment, but that's in the capital budget. And then the additional funding that you have are for, one, inflation. So when you look at the base budget of every single agency, we build in a rate of inflation. I want to say, I can't remember, Bob, maybe it's 3%, but we build in inflationary costs and adjustments for the city council, for the mayor's office, for every single city agency. In addition, we also have the $16 million that I talked about in my testimony to upgrade the wages for public, for all of our workers, especially our solid waste workers who are seeing about a 20% increase in their salaries over the course of their 3-year contract. We do that for ASME, for CUB, for fire, police. We all have brand new contracts. So the updated and upgraded wages are located in the budget, as well as the COLA increases as well. So again, I want to be really clear that it's not that we are doing new programs or that there are a whole lot of new investments. The actual and new investments or additional investments were about the 12 million that you saw in enhancement requests, and most of that is in the Department of Public Works for graffiti removal, for bulk waste collection, for curbside composting, for example. So I just wanted to be very clear with the general public. The city did not just find $400 million and that there's not $400 million in new initiatives or new spending in the budget. It's to pay for the current level of service, which is providing those salaries. And then it is $100 million in one-time capital dollars. So just to clarify about what we're talking about.
So on the page 3, the operating plan has an increase of $253,637,392, which is 6.86% increase over last year's operating budget. And so are you telling me that 6.86% is exclusively to cost the current level of service funding?
What, Bob, did you want to?
Yeah, and so first off, you're talking about the total operating budget. The general fund portion is an increase of 151 million, and a lot of that is dedicated to what the CAA discussed, things like inflation, the increased salaries that we see in this year's budget. I mean, there's some of the increase is grant funds, which clearly is totally separate from property tax, and then a portion of it is increase in the enterprise funds, which is supported by those rates. So I think it's not exactly accurate to say all of that is backed by the general fund is a smaller portion of that, is that $151 million. And as the CA said, most of that is inflation. That is the additional cost of salaries. That's additional cost of benefits, including pensions, which is much higher this year. And the true new spending is what we had talked about earlier, was about $11 to $12 million of targeted enhancements, where again, we saw, programs that we saw were either working, by ARPA or other sources, or things that we wanted to invest some more resources in because we thought that was the most important thing to bring the city, to move the city forward.
So was your 10-year projections that far off when you were talking about current level of service year over year? You did not project that to be 6.86% in previous years. Is that to say that your projections over the years are expected to be significantly higher than initially anticipated?
No, we walked through this at the overview hearing last week. We went through all of the categories of the current service projection. Salaries, again, we're including wage increases in this year's budget for the newly signed contracts for ASME and CUB, which are higher than they've traditionally been, which is, again, an intentional investment to bring those salaries up to speed. It included pension contributions. We have larger contributions into our pension funds, part of which is from the state requiring us to make more contributions into the state into the state system for teachers. It includes general across the board inflation, which the CA was right, it was about 3%. It varies a little bit by line item, but roughly 3% across the board. It reflects the increase in debt service payments from prior year borrowings that we've done to invest in our infrastructure. So again, you have an increase in the budget every year, and a lot of that is based on normal, cost of living adjustments or inflation. And, in the past few years, there's been targeted investments, that's new spending that, we think is very targeted towards things that the city needs to bring us forward.
Okay, so the fact is that there's a surplus. We saw from that hearing you were talking about different surpluses in property tax revenue as well as income tax revenue and some other stuff that we've seen larger growths than initially anticipated. So again, just to get back to my question so that I can pass it on to the next person. You guys feel that out of the $392 million of spending above last year's level of spending, that there's not $4 million that you could find to follow your 10-year plan of reducing property taxes by 2 cents?
So thank you for that question. So again, I just want to be really transparent about the numbers that we're talking about. We're not talking about $300 million of general fund dollars. What we're talking about is $150 million of general fund dollars, of which the majority of that is committed and statutorily required, or required as a part of agreements. So there's not $150 million extra that's just sitting there that we could reinvest. So I just want to be really clear with the public about the numbers that we're talking about. But to answer your question about the property tax reduction, again, I think we litigated this earlier at the finance hearing, but here's what I'll say about it, is that we have a brief window right now where we could provide relief in 2027. And so I think the residential rate goes to the board in June. We have a proposal that's sitting in front of this council, and there's an opportunity for us to put both of those things together. And when this goes before the board in June, then we can provide rate reduction. We can debate the method in which we provide rate reduction for the residents of this city. I think we all in this room know that our residents deserve a more affordable city and a property tax rate reduction. What we can't debate is that the mayor has put before this council a proposal to get that done. And so we should decide if we're going to move forward on that proposal or if we're not going to move forward on that proposal. But right now, that is sitting with the city council. We actually take this to the board in June, and there's an opportunity for us to provide rate relief for the residents of the city of Baltimore.
The mayor's proposal before the city council is a tax increase. That is a fact. There's nothing to debate on that, is to increase the homestead tax credit by 50%, the cap, which will cost many tens of thousands of our residents. There's what I think we said 70,000 or 50,000 currently right now benefiting from homestead.
What you're saying is not accurate.
Well, there's about 50 to 75,000 homeowners right now who are benefiting from the homestead tax credit. They have a 4% cap protection in place. Raising that 6% to 6% will increase people's rate significantly. That is not a tax savings to raise on some people to lower on others. My question is a very simple question. Can you not find $4 million in this budget to follow the 10-year plan of reducing?
So you're asking me specifically about what is outlined in the 10-year plan. What is outlined in the 10-year plan is what is before the city council. It is explicit in the 10-year plan what our strategy is for how we would decrease property taxes. If you have thoughts and feedbacks on a different strategy and method to generate the additional the revenue that it would cost to do the rate reduction, we're happy to have that conversation. But what is before this council is a proposal that would get done what is outlined in the 10-year financial plan.
So we heard this morning that $4 million is what it would take to provide that 2% reduction. So my question is it possible to reduce some of this spending by $4 million to provide that tax savings?
So again, I'm just going to reiterate the same point here, which is there's a proposal. I think it was sent to this council many months ago, probably at least 6 months ago, and it's been with the council to debate moving that proposal forward. This is something we want to do together for our city, as the administration as well as the city council. Again, we all know that we need to reduce property taxes for our residents. It's up to the folks in this room to decide how we want to get it done. There's a proposal that would get it done.
Okay, so I'll turn my question over to Bob. If the city council were to cut $4 million out of this current budget, would that provide a 2-cent savings in property taxes if it was not reallocated?
No, because we're talking about the residential rate, which goes to the Board of Estimates only.
So if we were to cut $4 million out of the budget, you're saying the administration or the Board of Estimates rather would still have to then apply it to that rate?
That's right. And again, as the CA said, we put in front of the council, we think, a very reasonable proposal, which would have, no, I'm going to say it again.
Councilman
I'm gonna
Schleifer
say it.
and Director, we can come back to this. We're going to get some of our other committee members. We'll come back on the second round for you. Vice President Middleton.
First of all, I just want to thank you for your responsiveness and effectiveness as you're governing all of the city agencies. I know it's a tough job, and I keep reminding myself that most of the things that we're talking about have been acquired from previous mayors, that a number of mayors. And you, as this first city administrator, has been working very hard, and kudos to the work that you continue to do and the personalities that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis within the agencies and on this council. So that being said, the two things I'm going to talk about, I guess I'll give an example. The blitz, I guess, that you have, and the one that stays fresh in my mind, was that a tiger team that went to Ricerstown Road? Would you call that part of a tiger team?
So no,
With the chops?
Yes, thank you so much for that, for your remarks and as well as for your question, Vice President Middleton. I do want to correct the record. I am the second city administrator. We did have someone before me, but I've been proud to serve this administration in this city for 5 years under Mayor Scott. So that was not a tiger team. I actually did not talk about the city service sprints that we do within my office. The city service sprints are, again, it's a way for us to actually galvanize government and, coordinate across city agencies to go out and tackle some of the challenges within our neighborhoods. One of the things that I saw very early on is, if there was an issue of illegal dumping, if we went out and looked at illegal dumping, there's probably some trees that need to be trimmed. There's probably a vacant house that's nearby, right? Like all of these challenges are, coming together in communities. And so instead of doing one-off approaches, what we did was, our city services sprints, where we set these ambitious goals that we were going to have agencies perform. And then we would do the blitzes in particular communities where we bring all of those services into one neighborhood to blitz that neighborhood and try to address some of the issues that they see right away. Now with the tiger teams, what I would say is the blitzes and the city services sprints, they are more of the physical manifestation. They are, the government working immediately out in a community. With the tiger teams, it's more of our data analysts. It's more of us mapping processes. It's more of us ideating and testing new technologies. It's the behind the scenes stuff that undergirds a functioning government. But at the same time, while we are ideating, while we're innovating, while we're testing new technologies and fixing processes, residents just want the illegal dumping cleared up. They just want their street light fixed. And so we use both strategies of the physical out in community as well as the behind the scenes process mapping and ideating that the tiger teams do.
Thank you for that clarification. And then my second question, comment. As a council member, and I think one of the reasons and ways that I have been a successful 20-year almost representative is because I put public services first, services to our residents. And I know we are continually having conversations about ways of lowering property tax. And I first want to make a point that, Mayor Brandon Scott is my 5th mayor, and he has been the first mayor that, in my tenure, that has really taken the time to think of a strategy to help lower property taxes. You can't wake up one day and say, I want to take this amount of money to lower property taxes. It's just not working that way, because we need to continue to keep our services going, and we need to keep people employed and et cetera. So on that note, and I'm going to give an example of a problem that I guess we need to continue to work on, that is just one example of maybe some things that are happening around the city. And this is an area that I acquired from redistricting, and it's about the ambassador, which there are several. I don't think that's the only place around the city that's going through that problem. So many, many years ago, 8 to 10 years ago, to be exact, we had this great big kind of ribbon cutting, groundbreaking to try to get that ambassador going as an art and cultural center that is basically, even though it's now in the 6th district, it will represent 4 council districts. So that's mostly Northwest Baltimore and maybe some of a little bit of Southwest, but there is nothing in that area that's arts and cultural related. And there is an issue with the property tax and the water bill that should have been taken care of before your administration. So I guess I'm trying to figure out, I guess I need to know where we are with that, because it's affecting a big hunk of the city. And there's things going on there. We need to get that moving. 10 years of just trying to get this kicked off is just insane.
Yes, ma'am. So thank you so much for that question. And I do have an update there, but there's an important through line that in your question about the Ambassador Theater. So my understanding of the Ambassador Theater is that there are some liens that are on that property: water bill, tax bill, right? And earlier today, we had a discussion with the finance department about uncollected taxes, uncollected bills and fees. This is an example of that, right? And so oftentimes, especially during tax sale or, throughout the years, I'll get requests, this nonprofit needs us to waive their water bill, or, can we figure out a way to abate the property taxes, right? This is, again, going back to that through line about uncollected debt. It's really incredibly important that we are very judicious about going out and doing the collections and not doing a lot of abating and waiving of taxes, fines, and fees, because it does impact the city's bottom line. It also impacts our credit rating with the rating agencies, which we can talk a little bit more about. Now, we gotta also get creative, because we know we have a lot of vacant properties that have water bill liens on them and tax liens on them. And so we have to get thoughtful and creative so that we can still allow for development to happen. But I did want to just make that point around how, we got to just be more judicious about and limit when we waive, overdue taxes or fines or et cetera. But we also don't want to stand in the way of developers. But with the Ambassador Theater, what we will do as a next step, I know that the Deputy Mayor Young has already been engaged on this, but we will engage with BDC to figure out what resources they might have available so that we can figure out how to find a path forward for that project. But again, this is one of the challenges that we deal with day in and day out with so many vacant buildings and properties within the city.
Thank you, and I'll stop there.
Councilman Gray?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, CAO. Your office oversees numerous mayoral offices. Many of the offices are listed on page 364 and have either been zeroed out or have been newly funded as a separate office. Can you talk about any tracked outcomes, both good or bad, from the restructuring over the last 4 years? And what can the public or the council anticipate over the next fiscal year from these adjustments?
Thank you so much for that question. So just to clarify, the mayoral agencies, most of them fit under the chief of staff. So African-American male engagement is under the chief of staff. MEMA is now standalone. Overdose response is under the deputy mayor for equity, health, and human services. So they're kind of split between the two. I'll let the chief of staff speak to the agencies under him, and then I can talk a little bit about some of the agencies that fit within the city administrator.
Thank you, Madam CA, and thank you for the question. As the CA said, under the mayoralty, there are 7 offices. There's executive direction and control. There's OPI, which reports up to the CA. There's MOAIM, which reports up to me. LGBTQ affairs, which reports up to me. Older adults, which reports into Dr. Duraza. BC Moore, the overdose office, which reports into Dr. Duraza, as well as MOACE, which reports into Deputy Mayor Young. And sorry, what was the second part of your question?
And okay, and can you talk about any tracked outcomes, both good or bad, over the restructuring? So I don't know if that would be.
Gotcha. Yes.
You can
Thank
answer
you.
your part, and then CEO can answer hers.
So with MEMA, what we've seen is MEMA's grown from, Catalina being a liaison to the immigrant community in the Mayor's Office of Neighborhoods 15 years ago to then building the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. And they've sort of graduated into becoming now a standalone agency, and so that's what's been proposed in this budget. The Mayor's Office of Infrastructure Development, you'll see in this budget, has been abolished, and those positions have been absorbed into other agencies, including the Mayor's Office, as well as other agencies, and I think the CA can talk more about that context.
Sure. So as you'll recall, and then I'll give you some specific numbers here, but as you'll recall, during the Biden administration, there was an Infrastructure and Jobs Act that was passed. We established a Mayor's Office of Infrastructure Development to go after those grant dollars because we thought we would see hundreds of millions of dollars come into the city. Obviously, that law is no longer the priority of the current administration, and so we've now dissolved that office, and that is zeroed out within the mayor's office budget. But you asked about some of the specific outcomes, and you heard me detail some of the forestry outcomes that we've seen through OPI. So the Office of Performance and Innovation sits within the mayoralty. That office has grown a lot in the time that I first came in into where we are now. But that's the office that is running our tiger teams. They were the ones that helped us get our forestry backlog down. They have built, and we will pilot and test for you all, a TEO worker app because they went out with our TOs and they saw that they were not able to get real-time SR information on their handhelds. They built that app internally. We talked about lean sheet processing times, which were at 30 days, and now they're down to 48 hours, right? Which is helping us to move development along faster. So those are some of the things that we've seen within OPI. And MEMA, for example, this council, I forget, how much was it? A $2 million or so investment last year. They leveraged that. They bought in nearly $1 million in private investment, and they've been able to support dozens of families that need our support with legal services and otherwise. The Squeegee Collaborative, which is run under the Mayor's Office of African American Male Engagement, has seen I think more than 90% reduction in squeegee activity across the city. So those are just a couple of miscellaneous outcomes that we've seen from some of the mayoralty agencies.
Okay, and so basically what you're saying, just as a follow-up to that, is that OPI, a lot of it is OPI, the measure, the actual metrics and success of whatever mayoralty department, for lack of a better term, that's what you're using to measure the performance and whether the adjustments and the restructuring of the agencies, whether that is MEMA standing alone, whether that is consolidating.
So each of the offices, they have their own performance plans, and so they have their key performance indicators, which are the drivers or the indicators that identify whether or not they are performing for their services. The services provided by MEMA are going to be different than what OPI does, for example. But I used OPI as an example because they are a bit of an extension of my office, right? They are the brains of the office, if you will. And so while the deputy mayors are providing executive level level oversight and engaging deeply with the agencies and managing and monitoring, oftentimes we got to deploy teams to go in and actually fix, parking enforcement or fix lien sheet processing. And so that's where we might deploy the folks in OPI to support that work. And so I was just giving you a couple of examples of ways that you can measure the performance, the outcomes, and the success of the mayorality in some of those agencies. And also OPI did release their annual report.
Okay, yeah, because that's what I was getting at, basically, like how are you guys monitoring the performance of these mayorality-related agencies? I will, for my next question, I just want to take a moment to talk about cross-agency and mayor's office communications. Can you talk about what protocols are in place to communication channels to make sure not just when there is a critical incident, but especially when there is one that support real-time communication across agencies and mayoral offices are received? Who at a leadership level makes that information, make sure that information is not only being pushed out to leadership, but those city frontline workers?
Yes, thank you so much for that. So there are a couple of things. Here. So it depends on the type of situation that we're talking about. So if it is one that is at an OEM level, right? So they're we might be at a watch level, right? For example, because there's a storm that's happening. So typically, what happens is there's information sharing protocol where the Office of Emergency Management will notify me, and they will also notify the mayor. Unfortunately, the deputy mayor is no longer here, but the deputy mayor for public safety would be notified to indicate that there is an issue and we need to be at a watch level. Now, that notification will come through email, and then oftentimes the OEM director will notify the mayor and I if it's a critical situation. The mayor and I will then discuss whether or not there are others that need to then be notified. So for example, let's say there's a fire in your district, right? Oftentimes the agency has their own notification protocols, but the mayor might make a call or I might make a call. It really just depends on what the situation is. But there are formalized communication protocols when it comes through OEM. If there's an issue within an agency, typically what happens is the agency director then notifies the deputy mayor. So let's say there was, unfortunately an employee that has been injured, then the director will notify the deputy mayor, who will then notify me, or they will notify both of us at the same time. I'll make the notification to the mayor, and then we will, depending on the situation, make other notifications, whether it's to council, media, the public. Again, it depends on the situation. Is there a specific situation that you might want me to detail?
So I guess you gave me an example of email, but basically what I was asking is just to make sure that ensure there's a smooth multi-agency communication, are you guys reviewing everything that comes through, but also in reaching out? I understand that you say email, but if there's an extreme emergency, I'm sure the protocol isn't just email, right? Phone calls are made. You answered most of it, but my main concern was just ensuring that the internal communication process from your that your office is reviewing it and also approving whatever the communication or policies are, just to make sure that if it's a multi-agency outreach or response, that everyone knows the protocol and everyone knows who to reach out to and where the information is going to initially and how it's being sent back out.
Okay, and then, so can I give you very, very quickly just two things? So one is building closure notifications, for example, right? So DGS typically manages that, but I would approve any language around building closure notifications as an example. And another example that I think you might be getting closer, that I may be getting closer to, is on the interagency communication, right? If we need both DHCD and forestry and DPW responding, is that?
Yeah, so, okay, hold on. So I think I have an example. All right, so if there's a critical incident involving police at a rec center or a park, I know it's important to make sure that leadership is in the mix, but most important, the staff that are on site and also know. So I know we're talking to Director Moore, but if there's something that's a critical incident involving a police at a rec center or a park, to make sure that it is of the utmost importance that the staff at like the ground level
Got
is
it.
also
Yes.
receiving that information.
That's-
And like how
yes.
that is how that is being pushed out, not just through email, but if someone's literally like, hey, something's
This is
going on
happening.
in and around, like we need you to lock down. And one of the examples I can
Mm-hmm.
bring up was the incident at the park with an individual who was assaulted. The Carrie Mary Nature School, they didn't know. They had to reach out to us, and then
Got
we
it.
let
They
them
didn't
know what was going on. And when we have a nature center, there are kids there, that would have been really important for them to know and not just to hear, people flying over. And granted, that was a few years ago and things have improved. But for incidents like that, what is the protocol and what's the follow-up and how are nature center, rec centers, these folks on the ground, schools, how are they receiving these notifications now?
Thank you for that. That's really good feedback and a really good point. I think we have, we're pretty well coordinated at the top line, but to your point about getting it down to the front line and to adjacent folks around us, typically that is managed on the front line. So let's say fire is involved or police are involved, usually they have their folks that will do some of that outreach, but we can more formalize or, do some follow-up with the agencies to develop some more formal protocols around that. But typically that is managed on the ground with whoever. And if it's at that level, we have an incident commander, and then incident commander would then direct all of the folks on the ground. But I take that as feedback.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that because I think the way in which you guys have your coordination at the top level is impeccable. I think sometimes certain agencies, depending on whatever the situation may be, maybe that same type of thoroughness may not be followed, and there may be gaps in it. And so, just to make sure that coordination not only goes to like the folks in charge, but also the folks on the ground.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Councilman Gray. I actually wanted to follow up on one of his questions from, it was a while back. It's regarding the 6 positions for the Mayor's Office of Infrastructure Development. What agencies or where were those positions absorbed?
Yep. So in the Mayor's Office of Infrastructure Development, and Khalil can help me, I actually think it was more than 6 positions. Team, can y'all give me the number of positions? Was it 11? The team will pull up the actual number of positions that existed. So all of the staff will remain within the city government. We were able to retain 5 positions to fund the newly created Deputy Mayor for Operations. And we will be working individually. I don't want to speak to those staff and publicly about those staff, but they've been really instrumental in some reform work that the Deputy Mayor of Operations has been doing with the Department of Transportation. They were very critical in standing up capital stat, and so we want to be able to continue to keep that skill set to really help us strengthen our monitoring of the capital process, as well as transportation and some of our operational agencies. So it is likely that they will remain within that operations cluster.
Okay, so we know that 5 are with the deputy mayor of operations.
The positions themselves.
The
So remember,
positions.
so the deputy mayor for operations was brand new, so he only had one ADM or assistant deputy mayor pin. So right now it's just Khalil and Graham on that team. We're gonna add 5 pins to support management of the operational agencies. And then one person has come to my team to fill a vacant already existing pin. The rest of the pins were just, again, absorbed or not continued, but the staff will continue.
So 5 with the deputy mayor, 5 of the pins, deputy mayor of operations, and 1 of the pins with your office.
1 FTE with my office. I didn't
1
take a
FTE.
pin. So I had a vacancy that existed. We just put the person into the vacancy.
And you said there may have been additional positions total?
Yes, do we have the
Council.
number of positions? Do you know how many?
It's a
Okay,
Total of 10.
okay.
Yeah, and the other ones were abolished, but the staff will go to vacancies in other agencies.
Yeah, we abolished, so that's what I wanted to be clear about. When we say absorb, we abolished the pins. They don't exist anymore other than the 5 that we kept.
Okay. Thank you, guys. You have one item within your presentation within the appendix, and that's showing just oversight through multiple deputy mayor lanes. Your operations, public safety, health and human services. My question is, how a deputy mayor is held accountable for agency performance within their portfolios?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a really good question. So a couple things I would say. So one, we spent some time over the summer as an executive team because if you'll recall, this is a different team behind me than what was behind me last year. So we have new deputy mayors and we did some restructuring, added a new deputy city administrator and did some restructuring. And so we spent some time as we were developing our strategic plan, talking about what our strategic priorities are. And we will do that work again, especially focusing in on, especially now that we have the strategic plan in place and we'll be doing the agency performance plans so that we can get clear on what we want to accomplish in each agency so that the deputy mayors are very clear about what they should be holding the agencies accountable to. So we have spent this year kind of really building that clarity for the deputy mayors so that they can hold agency directors accountable. We have a performance framework, if you will, an evaluation framework like we do for city employees. Every single executive also, has a performance evaluation as well. So again, we've just reconstituted the team, have been given very clear swim lanes now that we have our strategic plan on what we want to see the agencies deliver, and that's what we'll be working with the deputy mayors to accomplish.
What happens if a deputy mayor misses defined targets?
Well, we would hold them accountable in whatever ways we see fit. But I mean, again, a lot of this is the management of the directors that are managing their agencies. What the deputy mayors are there for is they are the executive direction and guidance to the deputy mayors and to the mayor, and advising the mayor on best practices, on management practices, and holding the agency directors accountable. I'll use the Deputy Mayor Zaid for example. Deputy Mayor Zaid ran 3 of the agencies that are within his cluster, right? That's why you elevate someone like that so that they can be an advisor to the leaders of those agencies on ways to improve performance and also advise the mayor. So I see them as being advisors to myself as well as advisors to the mayor and the agencies. And they're also helping the agencies better their execution. And I'm not sure if I answered your question because I think I lost it in translation. Oh, if they missed a target.
You know what, you answered it. Okay. I think at the end of the day, we all know what will happen if they miss a target. I just didn't know if you had any other.
Yeah, it depends on what the target is, right? And it depends also on the performance of the director. Just to speak plainly and clearly here, if you look at this cabinet from when I first started to the cabinet that we have now, we've made some transitions within this cabinet to provide better oversight and leadership. And I'm talking about at the agency director level as well as at the deputy mayor level. That's why we have a whole new set of deputy mayors that are sitting behind me. So just to speak a bit more plainly about what happens. They transition. We find new leadership that can deliver.
I appreciate you, CAO Leach. We're going to go to Councilwoman Ramos.
What page is the mayor's budget?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, CAO, for all you're doing. I appreciate the attention to detail that you have, and it's very much appreciated. I want to talk about, I have several questions, but I'll just limit to this couple. last budget and the last few budgets, we've talked a lot about this closed means closed issue.
Yes, ma'am.
And I know that OPI and several others have put a lot of time and effort into the closed means closed issue. There are times where closed does not mean closed. It's
Yes, ma'am.
still happening. And and sometimes the word closed doesn't show up, but it might say resolved, and it's still not resolved. And I thought that we were moving in the direction of having constituents get more detailed notes, which I think does occur every so often, but not this communication that it was transferred to another agency. There's still some frustration in the 311. And so my question is, are you still, I mean, I don't see it in any of the slides that you talked about in terms of the Tiger teams or any of the OPI work or anything like that. So I want to just make sure that somebody's still thinking about this and working on it. And two, if we see that happening, where a constituent comes to us and says, the illegal dumping is still there, but the SR says it's closed, do we come to you and say, hey, this is still happening? What do you want us to do to continue to document the fact that this is still happening? Because it is still very much a frustration to our residents.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for that. So, yes, absolutely. And it was in my presentation and it was in my remarks. I actually think I skipped over 311, but when we talked about systems, the systems improvement, one of the systems is the 311 system. So you referenced 311 Reimagine, which we released a report about ways that we were improving 311, the technology and the communication, which was done by the OPI, and I think a Tiger team at the time. And I'm going to have them detail a couple of the specifics, but a few things that I want to talk about that are really important with 311 and the 311 closures. And we can talk a little bit about that with BSIT as well. But what we are looking at is, one, the connectivity between and the integration of 311 with our work order management systems, right? So City Works within DOT, for example, or the systems that undergird DPW and/or housing, for example. And so we have to make sure that there's a seamless integration and that those two systems can talk to each other. We are going through a process now, and both the DCA and/or OPI director can talk about the new instance of Salesforce. We have an older instance of Salesforce, which is leading to some of the communication challenges and the integration challenges that we're seeing in the field when it comes to our work order management system. And so when you hear me talking about how we have to do some upgrades to the technology that undergirds kind of government operations, that's what I'm talking about. I'm gonna pause there, and either, do you want to speak about it, DCA? We'll have the DCA talk a little bit about it, and then we can close out with OPI on some of the specifics. But yes, continue to send those to me, because every time you send them to me, I send them to OPI. OPI then, they analyze what happened in each situation to figure out if there's a root cause of what's causing that issue. So continue to send them my way.
Good afternoon. I'm Shemaya Kearney. I have the honor and privilege of serving as the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer. So to the CA's point, under the leadership of our new CIO, and in partnership with Director Swift Williams from OPI, we are looking at our SRs and looking at the systems. One of the things that we've identified is that our Salesforce system, which is one of the systems that supports SRs, we need to get off of that system and modernize that system. So as a part of that work, we're also looking at the opportunity to streamline some of the SR workflows and processes. We've identified that we have a number of SRs that sometimes can also be confusing to some of our residents in terms of what they report. So we're doing a very comprehensive analysis of all of that work to look at the number of SRs, to look at the workflows for SRs, to look at the systems that undergird some of those systems, and also to try to identify if there are opportunities for us to either modernize or maybe even consolidate. So I don't speak tech, so I'll pass it over to Director Swift Williams to talk more about the technical piece, but it is really a comprehensive analysis of all of our SRs which will also help with the issue of closed means closed.
And what's the timeline on that analysis and, seeing some additional results?
So we're looking at it in phases. So right now, BSID and OPI are already working with some of our operational agencies on the streamlining and the process mapping. You'll appreciate that some of the process mapping can be a little lengthy because it requires a lot of different individuals to be a part of those conversations. So that is one part of the approach. In addition to that is also looking at the funding and also the systems that might be needed, that we might need to change to in order to modernize the system. So that is also a phase. And so I know that we like to talk about timelines, but I think if we're being honest with ourselves, some of that work is going to take us through the remainder of the year to do some of the process mapping and to also do some of the analysis on systems that we might need to switch to. I know some of the Salesforce work we've been talking about and looking into moving over to a modernized Salesforce system sometime early next year.
Okay, so hopefully we'll see either that money show up in, that we need, because I'm imagining you're going to ask for more money for this in the next budget, or it might be integrated already in.
If I'm not mistaken, I think it's in the capital budget. Are you familiar?
BSID may have allocated some dollars to it in the capital budget, but what I can say is we did run a Tiger team at the end of 2024 for this, and we made some really solid momentum.
Totally agree. Want to acknowledge that did happen. We're just still seeing it.
That's correct. We made some really solid momentum, and we had this in a couple of phases. And so we completed that first, and then the second was the more in-depth review of work order management and the integration between Salesforce and those systems. Since we completed that first Tiger team, there had been a number of reorgs within BSID. And so we had not re-engaged on that Tiger team yet. And we also wanted to give the new leadership in BSID the opportunity to develop and execute the strategy there. However, we do have a good read on what needs to happen next. We've launched 6 Tiger teams, well now 7 this year, and now we look forward to re-engaging with BSID through a 3-on-1 Tiger team once these are over in June. And so I do anticipate us being able to activate another engagement either late this summer or the early fall.
And Councilwoman Ramos, I just wanted to confirm that there are dollars in the capital budget. It's about $2 million.
Yeah, we're going to have the capital budget tomorrow, so I appreciate that. Okay, so that money's in there, and you're making some strides. So thank you for those details. Unrelated, I am super excited about the clearboarding work that the I-team has been doing, and DPW and so many, I mean, this is actually a multi-agency approach, right? Because you've got to have the different agencies working through it. Can you tell us what the timeline is for the implementation of clearboarding? I know we're in a pilot area right now in the city, and then we did a couple of houses in my district, and so I'm interested in understanding what the strategic thinking around the timing to be able to have at least all the city-owned properties clearboarded, and then, or is it all the properties clearboarded that are necessary, and then making sure that if there's anybody in those buildings that they're getting the support that they need? Can you talk a little bit more about it? And I bring this to you and not just housing because, again, it's different agencies coming together to try to work this through. I think it's innovative and necessary. We have to do it. And so I'm just curious around the timeline for full implementation across the city.
Yes, thank you so much for that question. And clearboarding is managed at an executive level, so it is managed through the I-team and then in partnership with our interim deputy mayor for public safety, Sam Johnson. And so Sam is going to talk a little bit more about that because we actually monitor clearboarding through fire stat because the fire department is a huge partner with the full implementation and installation of clearboarding. We started out, when we first started out, it was very limited. We were doing like 25 properties, then we raised it to like 100. We were focusing in on Codex properties in particular. But Sam, can you talk about where we currently are in the pilot?
Good afternoon, Sam Johnson, I'm Deputy Mayor of Public Safety. So we started out with this as a pilot, as you referenced. Now we're in the phase where the I-team has purchased the actual clearboarding. There's a system that was set up through the fire department where all of the clearboarding is in the fire department's warehouse. There are 2 contractors that have been hired to do the implementation of the clearboarding. So the contractors will go to the fire department warehouse, pick up the clearboarding, and we have a process where we identify 10 to 15 properties that we then send to the contractors. We began 2 weeks ago. They should be finishing up the first batch of properties this week. We should have about 30 properties that have been clearboarded. The way the system works is that we're utilizing the fire battalions with the highest number of vacants and the highest number of fire risk properties. So with that, we started in Southwest Baltimore, which is the fire department's 3rd battalion. So we're going to make it through the entire 3rd battalion. I believe there are 242 city-owned properties in that battalion. We're only focused on city-owned properties first. So once we get through the city-owned properties in that battalion, the 2nd battalion will be next because it has about 200 city-owned properties. We're working through refining the actual kinks in the system, and then we're looking to bring DPW in to kind of help with some of the VBN properties.
I thought that the contractors were also going to be able to do all of that because DPW is limited and, I mean, they're doing a lot. So I don't want to, have that. I know that that's normally what they do, but I think that, I thought it was, I guess I just didn't understand where all of that was coming in terms of utilizing DPW for a different set of properties.
Yeah, so the system is built so that the contractors are doing the primary bulk of the actual installation. And then we want to make sure that DPW has the skill set to properly install the clearboarding because it is different from the actual plywood.
Yeah.
So we want to get them implemented so that they have some kind of practical application of how that process works once the contractors are kind of phased out, and then we continue this process moving forward.
Okay, so what's the timeline of getting to another neighborhood, to citywide? I know we've got a lot of vacant properties, but we also have 1/3 of our fires are vacant property fires. So this is a really important strategy to secure these, but also to make sure that we're not impacting other properties that may not be vacant. So, and also our fire resources. So I'm just trying to understand what I get that you have to pilot it. Absolutely, we want to make sure that the system works, but I'm curious where we're headed and in what time frame.
I think that the time frame is going to be ongoing. It kind of depends on factors with the contractor because they go out and do an assessment of the property to see if the property can actually be clearboarded. And then once the properties are determined that they meet the standard for clearboarding, they go through the process of clearboarding the 1st and 2nd floors of the properties. So with this first batch, it's taking them about 2.5 weeks to do about 15 properties to 20 properties. So I guess once they get more into a rhythm of it, we may see them increase in speed.
Sure.
But right now, we're just focused more on the accuracy than the actual time to get it done.
Yep, and I'll speak to that just a little bit. So we were being very intentional
Yeah.
and targeted when it comes to clearboarding. Not every vacant property, as you know, qualifies to be clearboarded. It has to be structurally sound in order for us to do clearboarding on a property. And then there are other factors, which is why the fire department plays such a huge role, because the fire department also has to have the ability to be able to get in and out of the property. We also tag each clearboarded property within 311, so we know every time that we go out to that property if it is a clearboarded property. The other thing that I want to mention is the time that it takes to clearboard versus using plywood. It is obviously a lot more time intensive, and it is also more costly. Right now, the city hasn't incurred any costs related to clearboarding because we've been leveraging the grant dollars that we've received through the innovation team to be able to implement clearboarding. But if I'm not mistaken, is it like $150? It's over $100 per sheet of clearboarding material. So it is exponentially costlier than using that plywood. So when we get to the point where we are able to do maybe every Codex property or mayor and city council owned property across the city, it is going to be a significant cost to the city that we will need to account for in budgeting. But right now, we're going to continue continue to, as Sam mentioned, we're going battalion by battalion, area by area, leveraging our contractor, doing, groups of properties at a time until, we're able to make a significant dent, and also leverage DPW. DPW was doing the primary installation. We moved that to a contractor so that they could move even faster. We're going to retrain DPW, and they will also be able to do installations as well. So we'll have the contractor and DPW out. So over the next couple of years, I know you want an exact date of when every single vacant property in the city is going to be clearboarded. I can't give you that date. But what I can tell you is we think that it is extremely effective, and we're going to increase the installations that we're doing well above where we were. And, I don't know, maybe we can do some projections and figure out what we can do in the next year, just to give you an example of a goal that we might have. I'm not ready to give that to you right now, but I can work with the team to maybe come up with some projections.
Yeah, I mean, initially, you're going to find the pace, as you keep going, and then you can kind of predict from there. But then there's the other factor of once there is a fire, I'd like to have the city actually board it up and not these other contractors, and, our contractors and our DPW boarded up in terms of the clear boarding and not, somebody else. So we can talk about how that interchange is going to end up working. But I appreciate that this is going, and, I think the expense is absolutely worth it. It's worth it to invest in this way. Hopefully we'll be rehabbing all of these properties. So, and I know we're moving in that direction, but, it's worth it to not lose lives. It's worth it to maintain our resources for our fire department so that they can make sure that they're saving lives. I think that this investment is absolutely worth it, and it sounds like you're moving in that direction, but I don't want cost to be the factor. We want to be your advocates to figure out how we're going to make this work. And because it's extremely important for all. I mean, even if, somebody wants to rehab a property and, it does catch on fire, then that's even more damage that needs to be dealt with, right? I mean, this is a big deal. And so I do appreciate that we're moving in that direction and being intentional. I know that there's always a conflict between intentional and speed. And so, but I do think that, again, this is something that is I think a priority for us. So thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have more questions, but I guess we're going to do another round. So thank you. Mr. Chair, sorry.
No worries. Councilman Blanchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Madam CA, Repave Baltimore is a critical multi-agency effort to ensure the city's roads are resurfaced on a regular and effective timeline, and that agency staff are not constantly redoing work. First off, how is this effort going, and what are the key, the biggest hurdles that you see with the effort right now of Repave Baltimore?
Thank you for that question. I'm going to start, and then I'll let the deputy mayor talk a little bit more about Repave Baltimore. So Repave Baltimore was our effort to just completely overhaul the resurfacing program within the city of Baltimore. The process was antiquated. It crossed multiple fiscal years, right? The contract crossed multiple fiscal years, and it just really wasn't transparent for our residents. And so we, created the Repave Baltimore website, where you can not only track resurfacing of roads, but you can also track installation of ADA compliant sidewalks and ramps, as well as repaving of alleys, for example. And so residents are now able to track that information. In addition to just the website, and I think this year we're resurfacing 90 lane miles, if I'm not mistaken. And when I say 90 lane miles this year, this isn't across multiple resurfacing years. We're talking about from when we started resurfacing, which was in, I would say about March or April is when we started. It was a colder year this year. Until about November, we plan on completing 90 lane miles, 90.5 lane miles, if I'm not mistaken. But what we also have done is to do more strategic contracting as well, and multi-year contracting, so that we don't have contracts that are lapsing and need to be renewed in the middle of a resurfacing year. And then the third thing, which I think is the most important part of the program, is is the pavement conditions index. So right now, we don't have, a full accounting of the condition of every single road in the city of Baltimore. Well, we have worked with Cyclomedia. They've done an inventory and a scan of every single road within the city of Baltimore. We're gonna take that information, we're gonna put it on the Repave Baltimore website. We're gonna then categorize each road and as well as in the condition of that road. We think that probably a good percentage, 80% of our roads might be in, not the best condition, but this will actually give us the data. We will then take that data and that data will then be turned into the resurfacing program. So we won't have to put guesswork into which roads are gonna get repaved. We're gonna have an index that's gonna tell us the roads that are in the worst condition and which ones need to be repaved first and which one needs to be repaved later on. And so when we talk about Repave Baltimore, it's not just a shiny website where residents can look on a map and see when their road will get resurfaced. It's a complete overhaul of the resurfacing program.
Thank you. And before you pass off to the Deputy Mayor, this is probably for the Deputy Mayor, but can you talk through how Repave lines up with the One Dig strategy?
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Khalil Zaid, Deputy Mayor for Operations. It's one of the closest part or one of the most important part of Pave Baltimore is the utility coordination piece, in which you get all the agencies together, DBW, DOT, BGE, and everybody else coming at once through a meeting. We call it a coordination meeting or a street cut policy meeting where they meet and everybody put at that point where they are with the design that is needed. For example, this year, before we let our internal paving come to the council for them to choose, and you got a list of streets to look at. Before that list got to you, it went to BGE and it went to DBW, telling DBW, what are you doing this year? What work that needs to be done? If any work needs to be done in terms of utility work, we're gonna take this project out until the utility is completed. Now, with all that work that it needs to be done, we can't control the emergency work. So sometimes after a street has been done, BGE comes in and do a cut. It's usually do an emergency needs that needs, usually gas work. The same thing happens with DBW every once in a while. But at least everything has been tracked, everybody's been asked, and someone will be held responsible if they miss something that should have been planned.
And thank you for bringing up the emergency repairs, particularly when it comes to BGE, do you feel confident that the emergency repair process is being used only in situations that are actually emergencies and justified doing the cut?
Frankly, no. When it comes to BGE, no. They have an emergency, what you call umbrella permit, and with that permit, they tell us it's an emergency. Now, for us to be able to make sure that that's an emergency, it's probably pretty difficult for us. But we send people usually to look at it, to investigate, but I can't sit here and tell you I'm 100% sure every time there is a cut, it's an emergency cut.
Okay, yeah, because obviously BG has a clear financial incentive at the expense of our ratepayers to just do everything as emergency cuts. So, right, so it's a problem from, like, I don't know how many, like, spray painted cold patch BGE things I see across my district. And so I don't have a question for that. I really think that figuring out how to rein this in is an important part of this whole conversation.
Our people actually can, to some degree, figure it out, and we can, usually in the size of the cut. An emergency cut is usually limited to a smaller area. A planned project is usually a longer project or an attached to a new development or what. So at some point, our people will put him on notice and we'll let him know that doesn't look like an emergency work, but again, it goes back to a blanket permit that they do have, and it is very difficult to stop it before it's done.
Understood, yeah, and there's something of interest, a good conversation continued. The other piece of this, is on the actual street resurfacing side. And particularly with the challenges around emergency repairs and everything. Does the proposed budget represent sufficient capacity to create an inventory of plans in the next 3 to 5 years so that when these emergency or planned resurfacing work is necessary, we're ready to go with the planned resurfacing? Sorry, I'm talking about the actual traffic pattern redesign.
Can you repeat the question again? So I would.
Yeah, basically, right. What I'm worried about is from like a complete streets redesign perspective, right? Do we have, whether it's planned or emergency, do we have the actual planning capacity, I presume primarily within DOT, but to make sure that we actually are getting the plans in place so that when we do the resurfacing, when that's appropriate, those are getting implemented?
Not at this point, but we're working on it. And what I mean by that is the CA has directed DOT to hire 4 new traffic engineers. So now DOT traffic team will almost double this upcoming year. We're recruiting right now a new chief for the traffic division as well. Now, this is going to take some time to train some of those folks that we get to how to do the planning and the design for the traffic in the road and the traffic marking and maintenance of traffic in general. But we're hoping that we're going to get some people that are not green, but some people with some experience, and in the process, that learning or the training piece will be limited in nature.
Great, thank you, Deputy Mayor. And last question, probably for the...
We're going to keep that until next round. Okay. Councilman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, there we go. Madam CEO, thank you again for your time and your presentation today. I wanted to return to the 2 new cost centers related to the Deputy Mayor of Health and Human Services, Deputy Mayor of Operations. You made some references to kind of what that would look like before, how many positions, things like that. But the details are a little sparse in the book proper. I know that the numbers compare really similarly to the other deputy mayors, and so I'm not looking for anything other than just additional details about are we adding staff there? Are we moving staff there? And operationally, what will that help those 2 offices do? I appreciate it.
Sure. So currently, and I'll go through the breakdown of each deputy mayor. So in the deputy mayor for Health and Human Services, there are 4 positions. There's a special assistant. There's the deputy mayor themselves, and then there are 2 assistant deputy mayor level pins that are associated with the deputy mayor of Health and Human Services. One that's focused on more of the health and human services aspect of the work, and another that's focused on a lot of the youth engagement and the engagement with the school system. And the deputy mayor for operations, that is where you see the new pins, but those pins were moved. They already existed within the mayor's office of infrastructure development. They will move under the deputy mayor for operations. That's 5 pins. The deputy mayor for operations did not exist in last year's budget. So what I actually did there was I reclassified the mayor's office of infrastructure development director, which used to be Matt Garbark, and turned that into a deputy mayor position. And now we're putting the staff under them. So those are the only new positions. But again, they're not new positions because they were already in the mayoralty. They were just under MOID and are being moved under the deputy mayor for operations.
Great, thank you so much. I was sure it was something like that, but wanted to hear that kind of explained or broken down, because once you get to the full staff list, it's not clear who belongs to what, right? So I appreciate that. Turning back a little bit to property tax relief. I appreciate the 10-year plan. I've engaged with it kind of every chance I've had to work with you on it, and there's some pieces that I don't find helpful, like the solid waste fee and things like that. But do appreciate that beneath some of the trade-offs of a solid waste fee in exchange for a decrease in the property tax rate, in exchange for an increase in the homestead, a decrease in the property tax rate for homeowners. In addition to those two kind of like swaps, although there are real savings, 3.8 million a year, if I'm saying that correctly, on that's swap between the offset between homestead tax credit and the lower homeowner rate. Underneath that, then there's still, in the 10-year plan, there's an additional 6 cents, I think, of like just straight step decreases that aren't offset by anything. So combine that with the savings from the homestead kind of switch there, and you're essentially at 8 cents approximately worth of actual tax relief over the 10-year period. And so I appreciate that. It's hard to make room in the budget for tax relief. And that's not just kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. And so it takes a real commitment, and I'm glad to see that there, and I look forward to helping move that forward and helping make sure this plan, or even something even more aggressive, if the financial gods smile upon us, to be able to do more there. I would say, just to reflect on kind of where we've been though, I know there's lots of different revenue streams coming to the city, and they vary, and we're impacted by all kinds of state and federal things. But just looking at property tax revenue itself, because we haven't touched the rate since FY 2020, I think, right? That's what we've been sitting at. So in that period of time, property tax revenue has increased 35%, and we've seen inflation of 25 to 28%, right? So there's somewhere 7 to 10% of real increase, not because we've raised any rates, but simply because property values in the city have been rising faster than inflation. I would say in general, it's a great thing. That's because the city leadership, the city is doing well. We've seen some increased population, we've seen increased investment. It's a more attractive place, therefore, housing and property is more expensive. That's all a really good thing, right? And it also means that we have more resources to use to invest in the city and make the kind of targeted investments you're speaking about. I would simply suggest that that anytime we do see real increases in revenue, not just inflation, kind of stuff that would disappear with inflation or things like that, but anytime we see real increases in revenue is a good time for us to turn some portion of that over into property tax decreases. And I know there's a proposal to get that started with the homestead versus this. And then afterwards, later in that 10-year plan, there's that step-to-step increase. But I'd love to see that starting sooner than later. I think that recognizing that we have a piece of legislation that you all have tied to it, but I do think, even with everything we said before, that there is room even now, given that we've seen 2020 we've seen real growth now and no decrease in rates for that since 2020. There's probably room even in this budget, setting aside the unfinished business we have that you've put before us, and that we'll certainly get back to with eagerness. I think there's still room for property tax decrease. Comments, thoughts on that? I mean, I know finding that space isn't there, but clearly later in the 10-year plan, there is a commitment to 1 cent a year, $2 million things, and so why not start that now?
Yeah, so I think just a couple things. Context on the growth in property tax revenue versus the growth in cost. A couple things to remember since fiscal 2020. Number one is we were hit with a very large mandated increase in our schools costs, something that this administration supported, but I just want to be clear that when property tax is growing, there are oftentimes in the budget massive required payments, and that was probably the biggest one I've seen in my career, frankly. So although during that time inflation was high for about a 2 to 3 year period, as we're all very aware of if we're paying attention. So property tax growth during that time was strong, but there were also some pretty significant things that were largely out of the city's control in terms of mandated costs coming from the state or that broader inflation in the environment. And just like a household faces higher inflation rates, the city faced that too. I mean, we had to keep our wages at pace to retain people. We had to make increases to contractual service lines, materials and supplies lines. Everything became more expensive for us, just like it was for a household. So that was why when you really map those two out, that was why we had to pause the additional rate relief. When we did the original rate relief this goes back all the way to fiscal 2012, we had a new revenue source, which was we opened the casino. And so there was a big chunk of new revenue coming to us. And at the time, the administration said, let's dedicate that to property tax relief. So That rate relief that we achieved, it's great and we love it and we take a lot of credit for it, but it wasn't because we were necessarily trimming our belts. It was because there was a new source of revenue. The plan that we're presenting in the 10-year plan, we do want to trim our belts. And the plan that was presented was a net loss of city revenue. And so the reason we paired it with the homestead is because, again, we looked at our surrounding jurisdictions and our homestead cap is arbitrarily low, we believe. And, you know, most other jurisdictions in the state are at either 5% or 6%. Some of them are at 10%. And so, you know, our thought is by pairing those two, let's get started on the net savings, direct relief, which we weren't able to do in even our prior plan because it was coming from new revenue. Let's get started on that, but let's pair it with a change that will be better for us in the long run. It will make us look more like what other jurisdictions have already chosen to do. And as I think I've shared with the council many times, like, we've chosen to have this very low homestead cap, but that's part of the reason why our rate is so high. The other jurisdictions have figured this out, that they have slightly higher homestead caps and they have much lower rates. Now, there are broader factors that lead to that, right? We have a much lower tax base in a lot of ways, but these are things we can do to kind of help move us forward, and doing it together with what we proposed, what we proposed would have been a net savings for 65,000 homeowners. So, you know, that's the way I would kind of think of that history. And, you know, I appreciate this conversation because for the last couple of years, we've been having a kind of an academic conversation about should we cut our tax rate in half over 6 years or whatever that proposal was. So now we're actually talking practically about, yes, we can make progress, but it has to be done in a way that's responsible so that we're also protecting the city's, you know, long-term priorities in our budget. But we do want to do it in a way, and we did have a proposal to do it in a way that would result in relief for our homeowners, which I think is the first time it's been presented that way in many, many years.
Yep. Can I offer a little bit of context? So I think one of the points that Bob made is so critical here. One, it's about the revenue source from the casino that was there, right? Like that's really important. Generally, in most jurisdictions, the best practice is you have to have a new revenue stream a new consistent revenue stream in order to really drive down property taxes. That would be the best practice. The rating agencies would look more favorably upon that. But let's talk about a couple critical things. When I first came into this role, we had about $160 million budget deficit because of the increased costs due to the school system in Kerwin. We were not anticipating that. I think we thought we were going to see about $15 million that year. We went from $15 million to over $100 million. If you look, since I've been here, our contribution to schools has increased by 49, almost 50%. Like, that is amazing investment into the school system. We were proud to make it. Financially, we were not in the best position to make it, but we made trims across agencies, and we figured out a way to get our current contribution where it needed to be for the school system. But we were not prepared for that, right? Because we thought it was going to be more incremental. So we had to go find that money for the school system. We plugged that hole. We came back next year, $80 million. I think the subsequent year, 30. This year, we got 12 million. Next budget, or the budget after that, there was legislation passed, in support of the fire unions, for example, which is now going to force additional, or there are going to be additional costs that we're going to have to assume as a city, anywhere between $5 and $25 million. Thankfully, there's time for us to prepare for that additional cost. And so that's why it's important to have a new, consistent, stable revenue stream, is because there are going to be increased costs. Last year, we had $17 million out of nowhere, pushed from the state down, SSTAT costs that were pushed down to us, pre-kindergarten costs, I think, that were pushed down. I'm sorry if I'm misstepping here. But again, my larger point is that those were unanticipated. We had to find out how to absorb those costs. And so let's say we move forward, we say, okay, we're gonna do 4 million, 8 million, whatever it is in the budget this year. Without the additional revenue stream, all you're doing is that compounds over time. That's not 4 million next year, it's not 4 million 5 years from now, right? And so again, that's why you need a consistent revenue stream. The broader point here though, and I talked about rate stability and fiscal stability for the city of Baltimore, but we also have rating agencies that we are accountable to, and they're gonna look at us and they're gonna look at how we are doing things like reducing property taxes when we don't have an additional revenue stream. There's a working group that's at the state level that I will sit on and Bob will sit on, where we're gonna talk to the state about giving locals more revenue streams, because we've we've gotten a lot pushed down on us over the past couple of years while the state grappled with their fiscal instability. So I just want to be really clear to the public as well as to the council why we are pursuing an additional revenue stream and why it's not as cut and dry as finding $4 or $8 or whatever $1 million in the budget to reduce property taxes, and why we put the proposal that we have in front of you.
Sure. I really appreciate both responses there. I just wrap up by saying this. The current proposal, granted it compounds over time, Madam CEO, but the current proposal between the two adjustments, up and down, was $3.8 million in real savings, right? And so, and that was a gap, a delta that the administration obviously found was prudent and was a good thing to do, to offer that real relief and things like that. Seemingly, that relief could be offered in the form of a smaller decrease in the rate without the adjustment to homestead. I mean, if the administration was willing to thought 3.8 million was prudent without that double shift in taxes, just acting through the Board of Estimates, seemingly that number would still be a reasonable number.
Yeah. So I'll let Bob answer, but the other point I want to make here too is this actually isn't the first plan that the mayor has put forward. The mayor's first plan would give every homeowner a $1,000 rebate on their property taxes, and that was if we were able to get a portion of the sales tax, so which is a part of the overall vacant strategy. So this is not our first bite at the apple with trying to reduce property taxes. I just wanted to put that on the record, but Bob can talk about that.
Yeah. So our goal here is to be as aggressive as we can be on the rate. So if you're just doing a penny at a time or 2 pennies at a time, that's fine. That's something that you can pursue in the long run, but we wanted to be even more aggressive. And we think, one of the things we've talked about with the council is we have a real problem that, homeowners, residents here pay too much in taxes. We also have an optics issue, and that we're the only jurisdiction that has a tax rate over $2. Our residential tax rate with the plan that we proposed would have been under $2 for the first time in, I think, ever. And so I think, there's an important push there to say not only are we getting it under $2, but there's, room to grow beyond that year and to deliver more tax relief. So I hear you on the similarity of the amounts, but yes, we were prepared to do that. But we think to better protect the city in the long run, we think the way we were structuring it was the more prudent way to do it, frankly. And we kind of stand behind that. That's we think the best way to do it. And if we do it the way we propose, we can get our rate even lower over time. And, as I've explained in the hearings, like that homestead, it fluctuates up and down. There's years when you have very few people that are benefiting from it. There are years when you have a lot of people benefiting from it. What I've committed to the council is to say, like, if there's a lot of people benefiting from that would give us the room to do even more tax reduction in future years. So the way we paired it was we were going to give net savings. We'll say this again, our plan was net savings. We ran the scenario for every single taxpayer, residential taxpayer. 65,000 people would have seen relief under our plan. Another 10, it would have been basically neutral. And, I'm not sure how else we can, explain that. And then in the long run, we would have had the room, if we saw very high growth in our assessments like we did see over the past few years, we could turn around and deliver more relief to people and pair it the same way to say, hey, there's additional revenue coming in, we're going to reduce the rate further. And again, the key is, like, you don't want to go, when we're trying to sell the city to people to live here, you don't want to go and say, we have a tax rate of 2.24, but we have these. You want to say we have a residential homeowner rate of 1.9 or 1.8 or whatever it is we want to get down of. That makes us look much more competitive with some of our surrounding jurisdictions.
And to do that, to be successful, that requires long-term, sustained, dedicated leadership on both sides of this room, right? I mean, that's the only way to get there.
Yeah, but look, I think I said it in my remarks. Okay.
Yeah. Council President Cohen.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chair.
guys.
Madam City Administrator, I want to talk about one of the issues that we've discussed a whole bunch on the Board of Estimates. I've talked pretty frequently to the Deputy Mayor as well, and that is the issue of contracting out services. First, want to start with my premise, which is every single dollar that we can keep in-house, we should. We support our own workforce. The VP often talks about apprenticeships. The mayor and I have been leading a work group to try to build more pipelines into the workforce, into local government. I think not just here in Baltimore, but there's been a trend to increasingly outsource, contract out services that once could have been done in-house. I know you've made some efforts and been having some good conversations with the deputy mayor, but can you talk about efforts to rebuild our own city workforce, rebuild AFSCME through DPW, through DOT, our capacity to do tasks that at one time the city was doing, and subsequently we have started to contract out some of the services, particularly in the Department of Transportation and sometimes in DPW as well, that I would love to see brought back in-house.
Sure, absolutely. So there are a couple of top lines I want to cover here. So this administration strategically uses contracting, and coming out of the pandemic, our workforce really, really was depleted, especially our frontline workforce. So in the Department of Transportation, in the Department of Public Works, under the previous council and several years ago, I don't want to take us back to that time where we didn't have weekly recycling and we were on a biweekly schedule of recycling, which was one of the first things that I did in coming in as city administrator was dig deep into what was the driver of why we were not able to do our recycling on a regular cadence. Well, what I discovered was this wasn't a recycling issue. This was a larger workforce issue, and was specifically within DPW, it was within routine services. We had an unstable routine services department because we didn't have a bench, nor did we have enough staff. We also didn't have enough vehicles to do a basic city service, right? And so strategically, we made the decision that we would, while simultaneously building up and adding positions and crews and new equipment and optimized routes to the Department of Public Works, that we wanted to deliver a higher quality service for the residents of our city, and we wanted to pick up recycling weekly. And so what we did is we made the strategic decision to bring on contract support to help us meet the demands of when we couldn't meet the demands. Similarly, I looked at street sweeping, and we also did not have enough sweepers to perform our daily routes. And so what we may have had drivers, but we didn't have the vehicles to sweep the streets. So we contracted out with a vendor who provided not only the drivers, but also the staff to help supplement and support our street sweeping efforts. So in the years following the pandemic, there was a strategic decision made by this administration and me as the city administrator to bring on additional resources to stabilize some of our core city services for the residents of this city. Now, where are we now? So where we are now, and the deputy mayor can confirm this for me, but within routine services, we will no longer need that contract that we were using within routine services that was supporting recycling and mixed refuse pickup. We will be able to, at the end of this calendar year, no longer use that contract service because we have invested additional FTEs. We've modernized the fleet, we've optimized the route, and now that service can fully function without contractors. But we needed that bridge period so that we could still provide that service to the residents of the city of Baltimore. Similarly, on the street sweeping side, I think our final sweepers are coming in the next couple of months. Councilmember Jones was out there. He saw how excited everybody was when they saw the new sweepers because it took us so long. It took us like 2 years to get those sweepers in. So now that we have our sweepers in, we have our drivers, we have our staff, we're optimizing routes, we're overhauling that program, we will be able to wane ourselves off of that contract. So that's just in DPW, for example. Similarly, a lot of that is similar in DOT. There are also things that contractors can do alongside us faster. And we, in some instances, we are so far behind with things like ADA compliance, right? Or even with the amount of resurfacing that needs to happen in the city, that if we want to make any real progress, even if we were able to staff up all internally, we would still want the support of small businesses, because that's what contractors are in many cases. Some cases they're large businesses, but we would still want that support so that we can get more work done. And I see that you may have another question, so I can pause there unless you want me to continue.
Do you want to name some specific services within DOT? Because
sure.
my sense
and then
is
the
it's coming up on the board. quite
Yeah,
a
the
bit.
deputy mayor can talk a little bit, we can talk a little bit about some of the specific things, services within DOT, but what, I just want to like put a finer point around this, because I mentioned in my presentation some of the insourcing work that we did in this year's budget. So in BSIT, for example, in the aftermath of ransomware, there was a large over-reliance on contractors. And so what we have been doing within BSIT is we've been analyzing their contracts, and we've been going through and actually creating new positions, because in some cases, the pay for the direct worker would be equivalent, right? Because there's the overhead for the contractor. So this budget includes more insourcing for BSIT and less reliance on contractors. There will be an additional tranche that we will do for BSIT as well. So it's not just in our operational agencies, it was in some of our internal services agencies as well. The last thing that I'll say is absolutely, I want to build a very strong workforce within the city of Baltimore. There is also the ancillary benefit of supporting small, local, and minority businesses within the city of Baltimore as well, who want to do work with the city. And we will always need those businesses to be a part of our ecosystem. So there is unlikely to be a day where every single city service is only provided by city employees. There will always be a time where we are working alongside some of our small and minority businesses, and that only helps the broader Baltimore economy when we do so.
Understood, but I would respectfully suggest that the scale has been too tipped in one direction, and that it is essential for us to rebuild our own workforce strategically. We have, as you've utilized, so many great colleges, universities in this town. I think about some of the higher end engineering work that happens in the Department of Transportation that we're contracting out. And then I think about some of the less high educational requirement jobs that, again, when we overutilize contracts, to your previous point, there is a premium that we end up paying for it. And so, of course, we're always going to want to work with some businesses, minority contractors, certainly restaurants, other small firms in the city. But I think moving in the direction of a workforce that is more able to accomplish the city services that tax dollars go to, I think needs to be the goal. And I wonder about incorporating some of that push into the 10-year plan, into
It's there.
into efforts to strengthen our own internal workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. So we share that goal, which is why it is in the 10-year plan that we want to have a higher paid, smaller, more nimble workforce. There's a whole entire workforce section within the 10-year plan. And so that's our goal as well, is to do more of insourcing. I think we might have a side letter with the unions, I can't recall, to do a study related to insourcing. It's why it appears in our budget. But the deputy mayor is going to talk a little bit about some of the DOT work, because I think that was one of the specific services.
So Councilwoman Middleton brought up the issue about within 5 administrations that I've seen been either as an employee or as a citizen of the city, 8 administrations. And this administration and this mayor have invested in 3 separate parts that you could see that is, I haven't seen with any before. He invested in a fleet. This fleet that we have right now is state-of-the-art fleet that I'll be happy to take it anywhere in the country. He invested in the buildings and in the place where these people work. And you could see in public works at minimum, where you see a lot of our buildings and a lot of the investment in the public works facilities that we have. And finally, what do we have? He invested in the salaries for those employees. And we've seen in the past, for the next 3 years, 20% increase for AFSCME employees. I don't think we have seen that increase anywhere within any period of time that I can remember. So those three things in general, in order to encourage more and more people to come and work for the city. We talked about DOT and what possibly and what we've done. We talked about traffic and traffic management. We doubled the traffic group right now. What those people will be doing will be helping us out in design a lot of the traffic arrangement for the work that needs to be done. One of the problems that we see, it is we're always behind in terms, we have the plan for the pavement is ready, but the design for the traffic management piece is always behind. So those people will come in. So this year we'll go from 5 to 11 traffic engineers in-house to help with doing the design and move the design from relying on a contractor to do it in-house. Eventually, we're gonna be moving into a lot of the work that we give for the design piece to more engineers in-house to do those, even the pavement work itself. We'll be looking, as we do, not to replace the contractual capacity, but to add to be able to do a lot of the concrete work that we stopped doing at some point. Let's bring a little bit of the concrete work to do some of the emergency work that we could do in-house. And I'm saying here, we're not replacing the contractors. Every city our size, larger, smaller, always rely on contractors to do the big part of the work. It makes financial sense, and it makes performance sense as well. So as we start looking at it in general terms, we're heading definitely in the right direction to bring more and more people in-house as the opportunity comes to get what makes sense. When the city decided to bring some of the paving in-house, in 2000, 2002, 2003, we have zero in-house paving mechanism. We brought it in. Why did we bring it in? Because it made operational sense and it made financial sense as well. So we'll continue to do that as well.
Thank you for your longevity in service to our city, Director Zaid. What I'm looking for, and I know we're due for a conversation, you and I, is a really clear roadmap of how we are going to bring some of these, what I would consider to be doable services in-house. I understand it is a longer ramp up to, we've talked on the Board of Estimates about high-level structural engineers within the Department of Transportation and at times the Department of Public Works. But at minimum, when it's curb cuts, when it's the concrete work, these should be jobs that support Baltimoreans. Baltimore people that graduate from our schools, that live in our city. I look at the workforce of DPW, that is a Baltimore workforce. I think we need to move in that direction. And the last point I want to make here is I sometimes worry with contractors about a lack of oversight and some of the work being shoddy. Some of BGE's contractors do not do a good job when they repair our roads. During the snowstorm, which we don't necessarily need to get into, but some of the work by some of the contractors, again, very once in a generation snowstorm, but some of the work was not good and heard a lot of concerns from residents about contractors that were not doing what needed to be done. And so I think it is both a matter of, it is ultimately better for the taxpayer, better for the worker themselves, our own municipal workforce, and ultimately, frankly, better for our ability to hold our own folks accountable when work is in-house. And so, Deputy Mayor and CA, if you'd be interested as well, I would appreciate, as follow-up to this conversation, a roadmap for some of those essential services that you've talked about being brought in-house.
So just to reiterate here, like I think one, I've outlined one. So I'll just go over it very quickly. Within the Department of Public Works, again, we put temporary measures in place. The contractor that we had that was supporting mixed refuse pickup, that contract ends at the end of the year. The Deputy Mayor can confirm for me. That's no longer going to be there. So that is work that is now all in-house because over the past 4 or so fiscal years, we've been steadily increasing the number of FTEs within DPW. We've been increasing the fleet. We've been doing the routes. That's one contract completely gone, right? Same thing when it comes to street sweeping. That's a contract that's going to be completely gone. So what you actually see is a pretty intentional approach from this administration to not compromise the quality delivery of city services while also simultaneously building up our workforce so that there is a seamless transition and residents don't notice a huge difference in their service being stalled, like when we had to go to biweekly recycling. I don't want to put residents, and I'm not going to put residents in a position where they have to compromise the quality of of their services while we build up our workforce. We're going to do it at the same time. So that's on the DPW public solid waste side. When we've talked about water and wastewater, which is also a lot of contractors, a lot of that is driven by the 2 consent decrees that we have in water and wastewater, because we have to have our plants operating at certain levels, and we are seeing some of the highest quality plant maintenance that we've seen, and the effluent levels are the best that they've ever been. It takes at least 3 years for us to get folks certified. And so what we are doing and what we have is a very intentional plan where we are working to get folks certified that are in our wastewater treatment plants. You see us abolish a number of positions, hundreds, I think, over 100 positions within the water utility, not because we don't need the positions, but because they're not modernized, and we need to modernize the PDs. We've already raised the wages. So 2-3 years ago, we raised the wages for water and wastewater workers so that we can now get qualified folks into those roles. So again, within Public Works, I've just outlined what our strategy is to do some of that insourcing work. Similarly, same thing, I talked about BSIT, and then I think the next one right now, we're doing staffing study within the Department of Transportation, and we're going division by division so that we can look at what the market tells us, what our peer jurisdictions and how they are made up to see where we can compare, so we know exactly what positions we need to create and what capacity we need in order to bring more services in-house. And so, again, I just want to be clear that it's a priority of ours, as demonstrated by all of the steps that we have taken without compromising the delivery of services for our residents.
And yet, and still, almost every week on the Board of Estimates, we approve new contracted out work. And so I appreciate the effort, but I appreciate the effort by the administration, and I look forward to being a partner in that work. I remain committed to making sure that we are finding the appropriate balance, and that which can be done by Baltimore workers is done by Baltimore workers. I'm not going to disagree with you that there is always going to be some need to have local businesses employed and supported by the city of Baltimore. But as I have sat there week after week after week, I continue to believe there is an urgent need to make a hard push on you call it insourcing workforce into our local government. And again, I appreciate the follow-up conversation with the deputy mayor and you as well, Madam CA.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I forgot to mention before you started, and this is actually a perfect segue, the House rules for round 2. Council President Cohen has started round 2. Committee members will have 2 questions. Everyone will have 1 follow-up after your question. And so, for example, CAO, question, response, follow-up, response, next question. And so all committee members will have 2 questions. Non-committee members will have 1 with 1 follow-up as well, and that's just in the interest of time. So next we have Vice Chair Schleifer.
CAO, my first round of questions I asked about the ballooned budget of mayoralty, which right now in fiscal year 27 is proposed at 134 positions for a total of $28.5 million. I had asked as a committee request to get a side-by-side comparison, since you wanted to compare it with 2020, which is the first inherited budget of the administration. Thankfully, I'm sentimental and I still have my fiscal year 2020 budget book sitting in my office. And so since you guys didn't want to make it a committee request, I went up there, pulled the book, and did a side-by-side comparison. And let me tell you what I found. In 2020, mayoralty positions were 88, which you stated. And you said, well, right now, under executive direction and control, it's really 83. And all the other line items that are under the mayoral control, well, those are separate, so really the mayor's office is not ballooned. But in the mayoralty book in 2020, it shows all the different items that are included in the mayoralty budget. And so the ones that are the same in 27 as were in 20 are Office of Performance Innovation was in both, The multicultural affairs was in both. African American male engagements in both. LGBTQ affairs is in both. The only ones that are really up for questioning, the arts and culture one is up for question because there is a special events here, but let's just put that aside because it's not the exact same function. Obviously, the opioid restitution is not included and wasn't around back then, so let's just remove that out. And then the last one is the older adult affairs and advocacy, those 4 positions, which we know is a newly created agency, so let's pull that out also. When we include the exact same functions in 27 that were under mayor control back in 20, there's a difference of 122 positions that's in 27 versus back in 2020, it was 88 positions. So the mayor's office has increased by 40% for these exact same functions. So why did that happen?
So I can't validate your numbers because I don't see them anywhere, but if you provide them to me, I'm happy to do an analysis on those numbers. But what I can provide you and we can show this to the public, and this was in my slide. So we talked about FY20 and I have 83 here. I think you said 86, but we can, that's fungible. We can figure that out. And then again, I show the positions over time. But just to be clear, I'm not sure about the Cultural Affairs Office. If the Chief of Staff or others are aware of that, then we can talk specifically about that. But I can speak specific to some of the changes. So again, we talked about arts and culture. That's brand new. We also talked about the Office of Overdose Response. None of those positions are funded by the general fund. And so actually what you see with this mayor's office is any growth in positions that you've seen, or a significant number of the position growth that you've seen, has been not on the taxpayer dime, right? So you have an Office of Overdose Response where we had our city solicitor that went out, got us $400 million from large corporations and pharmaceutical organizations. We are using that to invest in substance use disorder and support our residents. You also saw this administration go out to philanthropy. We brought back money we talked about clearboarding with the councilwoman. That money has been used to do clearboarding. It's also been used to create new positions, 7 positions of which are listed in the mayor's office budget that, again, is of no expense to the taxpayer. The only request from that philanthropic entity was that we provide 4 general funded positions. And so what you actually have seen from this administration is that we have been thoughtful and strategic about ways to provide critical services to the residents of this city without actually relying on general fund dollars to do so.
So you just reiterated the items that I said I was removing from the 134 positions. So I was removing the opioid, I was removing the older affairs and advocacy. So I was not including those items in the 122 positions that you guys are currently using to perform the same functions that the inherited budget in the first year was 88 positions. So I'm just comparing apples to apples, the exact same.
It's not an apples to apples comparison, but again, if you provide me the data that you're looking at, like I provided you in the presentation that we provided, I think at the end of last week, then I'm happy to have an actual apples to apples comparison conversation. During FY20, I don't believe there was a city administrator that existed at that time. So you want to remove the city administrator from that to make it more of an apples to apples comparison. Again, we can have this conversation, or you and I can again trade the data and we can talk about what is a true apples to apples comparison. But what this administration has done is gone out and get additional resources for the mayor's office, or not even for the mayor's office, for the taxpayers, for our residents, to support those folks suffering from substance use disorder, and to support innovation, for example, and it's of no cost and consequence to the taxpayer. So that's what I really just want to reiterate.
Yeah, so you keep bringing up like the opioid stuff, and that's great, and we're going to thank the city solicitor for her great work on that when she comes in later on. But again, I'm comparing apples to apples, and the data is pulled from the 2020 book where it shows all the functions that line up exactly with the functions that are in 2027. And so when I listed off in my opening of this question the exact items that are in both 2020 as well as 2027.
And they didn't line up with what I have on my side. I don't know about an Office of Cultural Affairs, and without me being able to we can do the apples to apples comparison, but I just talked to you about, you mentioned cultural affairs. That's not an apples to apples. There's not a city administrator. That's not an apples to apples. So if you really want to have an apples to apples conversation, I think you're going to see that we are on par with where we were in FY20. There is not some exponential growth or ballooning of the mayor's office budget. It's just not accurate, especially not on general fund dollars.
So if I could finish what I was saying. So in 2020, the exact words that are here in the 2020 book, which I will present to you after, says immigrant and multicultural affairs. That is one of the things that are included in the 88 positions that the mayor's office then had. Here, it's parsed out as Office of Immigrant and Multicultural Affairs. So yes, it is verbatim, and I took the ones that are exact, and you're mentioning the philanthropy, which is ironic because that was part of the argument as to, well, our office, a lot of it is being funded with outside money, right? Is that money coming from Bloomberg this year for this budget?
So we received a grant from a third-party entity to fund the innovation team.
Okay, so.
Councilman, I'm going to ask for you to ask your next question, please.
Okay, to finish what I was saying.
Councilman, can you please ask your next question?
No, I'm going to finish what I was saying on this was
Jermaine, you can ask your question.
In 2020.
Councilman, you can please stop. Jermaine, you can ask your question. Councilman Jones.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Question first. Thank you, Council President, for your question earlier. Kind of got my first question out the way. I appreciate how you was just thinking about the workers and making sure we move things in the house. And also, Chief CAO, I want to thank you for the work you've already done on bringing people in. I understand that, you only can work with the workforce that you was given, and it's going to be a transition, and just encourage that we all work together while we work towards that transition. Because at the end of the day, I realize we get what we pay for, when it comes to city services. When you want to provide top-notch city services, it's going to cost you money. It's going to cost you a premium. But I think there's an opportunity for us to get best value while also hiring city workers who care about the city, while also paying them a good wage with decent benefits. So just want to say thank you for your work in doing that, but kind of leads me to my question. Within your presentation, one of the pillars you presented was being a responsible steward of city money, but also within that slide was, one of the slides said, I think, preparing for the future. Just my question then becomes, while having conversations with the state and other entities, the effects of the current federal administration is going to hit soon. I think the real impacts hasn't completely hit yet because it kind of takes 2 years almost for some of these decisions to hit the ground. While preparing for the future in a responsible way, I realized while looking at preparing for the future is a lot about lofty goals, right? And while we want to be ambitious and shoot for the stars, I think we also need to prepare that some hits may be coming up on the state level, which is going to trickle down to the city level, and just want to make sure we prepare for that impact in the next 2 years when it comes. And I didn't really see much of that in there, but if you can kind of expand on that just to make sure when that impact happens, we don't lose on the progress that we've already made over the years.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much. And that's a fantastic question. In last year's budget hearing, I talked a lot about the federal uncertainty because it was uncertain. We were seeing multiple things happening with grants. We had our law department that was going out and, filing lawsuits. But then what we've actually seen in the years since then is that we've actually seen some growth in our property taxes, like Director Sinema talked about. We have seen some challenges on the grant side, but it has not been as significant as we thought. And then also we were unsure of what was going to happen with the federal workforce and how that was going to impact the city of Baltimore. And our employment rate has actually remained pretty steady. And so we are we're continuing to closely monitor everything that's happening at the federal level. But the reason why I didn't I just mentioned fiscal uncertainty, but I didn't go into details about, some of the federal things that I did spend some time talking about last year. I think when it comes to the state budget, and I've mentioned this in my remarks a couple of times, that since I've sat in this seat, between, the increased costs incurring coming sooner in the plan than we thought and then we were prepared prepared for. Also, some of the increased costs that have been pushed down to us from the state that we were uncertain of and didn't know of. SDAC costs, for example, that came down to us last year after we actually finished our budget. There were pre-K costs. It was pre-K, right, Bob? It was a $1 million pre-K cost. And all of the counties through MACO were going back and forth because all of us received this bill that didn't even come up during the General Assembly session, but we had to figure out how to pay these additional costs. Now, of course, when it comes to our young people, we're gonna prioritize that, we're gonna get it done, but we are seeing more and more where the state wants to do more cost sharing with the local jurisdictions. I mentioned that there is a task force that was established by the state with the locals so that we could work together on what additional revenue streams and sources the local jurisdictions will be able to, leverage because we need a revenue package, quite frankly. And I've been pushing this through MACO as well. So through my role in MACO and, sitting in the administrators group within MACO, we've been pushing diversification of revenue sources and working closely with the state. We have no idea what we'll see next year. We're going to be facing the HUR cliff next year. We're going to be just as aggressive down in Annapolis to make sure that we can save HUR. So we are doing what we can to monitor and also manage and strategize around what's happening at the state level that is closer to us. Obviously, we have our partners in Annapolis and the governor that we can work with. When it comes to the federal level, obviously we have, the best delegation in the country and they're doing what they can. But we're trying to control what we can on our side here locally and working in partnership with the state to control costs.
Thanks for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question. Before I start, I just want to, for those watching, just apologize for that exchange. That is not something that's become of the city council. I know that Vice Chair Schleifer is very passionate about the budget, but I do want to apologize for that display for those that are watching. Deep down, we all love each other. So, but I'm going to start with my question. It's multi-agency tracking, but it has to do specifically with mowing. We all know it's that time of the year. For those, I know mine is getting a little higher. My guy wasn't able to get out there because of the wet weather this weekend. But once again, it is that time of the year, and we have multiple agencies responsible, I think about 8, for mowing across the city. Quite frankly, residents, they do not care which agency owns which parcel. They just know that the grass is high and the weeds are out of control, and they call it the real one. And so just to put it in perspective, 2023, we had 18,623 high grass and weed requests. In 24, 24,445. And 2025, 20,238. And we know that 2026 is just starting. Can you walk the council through what coordination is happening across agencies to stay ahead of high grass and weed on city-owned properties? Because this is not a new issue, and I know year after year we're reacting to the same problem. How are we attacking it proactively?
Thank you. That's a really good question. So there are a couple of avenues by which we look at mowing, one of which is clean stat / there is, we look, when we have clean stat, we do it on kind of a seasonal basis. So like if it's, preparing for snow or preparing for, mowing in this case. And so the first thing is making sure that each agency is clear on who is responsible for which parcel of land. You would not be surprised that there are instances where there's confusion of who is responsible for mowing and managing a particular plot of land. I think the real issue around mowing coordination is it's actually on proactive, right? Like the proactive mowing. So when it comes to like mayor, city council owned properties, when it comes to our medians, for example, when it comes to our parks, for example, right? Like we know who owns and who is responsible for what. When it comes though to vacant properties, whether it is owned by the mayor and city council or whether they are privately owned, we have not been as proactive as we can be, and we need to get to a space where we can do proactive mowing. Right now, it is not as proactive for those vacant properties, right? I want it to be, high grass and weeds in particular is a pet peeve of mine, even though my grass is really high right now. And tree pits, for example, I'm like very dogged about our tree pits. And so what I am hopeful is that we will continue to work with OPI as well as with city agencies to figure out any efficiencies that we can identify in a proactive strategy so that we can proactively get out to some of these properties. The other component of this, which, the other component of this is thinking about housing and community development. What happens is oftentimes we're sending out the inspectors. When the inspectors go out, they're looking at sanitation issues, sometimes. And so we created a new sanitation classification so that we can get out faster to those properties because we do want to cite the property owner because they are responsible for maintaining it and not just maintaining the property ourselves. So there's a fine balance between us getting proactive and getting out there and making sure that the high grass and weeds are maintained across the board, but also citing those owners, absentee owners who also need to be responsible. So I take your feedback around figuring out a way to get to more proactive mowing. I would venture to say we do a decent job on mayor, city council owned properties. There's probably more work that we can do to mow on a more regular schedule, which we do have a regular schedule, but obviously weather conditions dictate the growth of grass. But again, it's a priority of mine, and I hope I answered your question.
You definitely did. It's something I really appreciate because I know that just before working in Councilman Burnett's office, and I occasionally do it, but now Cam does it in my office. It's the same houses that we have to put in, and it's only after we request it that then something comes out. But it's work. It's actual work. And so I want to make sure I'm following my own rules. So I'll just keep it short and make a committee request. And I would like this to be coordinated through your office. I would like the master list showing which agency is responsible for mowing which properties, the volume assigned to each agency, and how often these properties are scheduled to be maintained. And also clear metrics for each agency, including response time, number assigned parcels, number of completed cuts, outstanding backlog, and repeated through-on-one locations. And I'll be asking this of city schools and also the comptrollers because I really think that, as you said, we need a really citywide proactive strategy to address, like I like to call the small things. Like these are things that people see every day that this is why they don't believe in government sometimes. And so I can repeat that and okay. I would like to see a master list showing which agency is responsible for mowing which property, the volume assigned to each agency, how often those properties are scheduled to be maintained, and then also clear metrics for each agency, including response time, number of assigned parcels, number of completed cuts, outstanding backlogs, and repeated through-on-one locations. I'll email it to you.
They got it. The teams are collecting it, the follow-up.
Okay, yeah. And thank you, and Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to first, it seems like in the budget book that multiple places it states that one of the budget saving measures has been to eliminate positions that have been vacant for more than 2 years. And I think that makes sense. I'm wondering if I can get a list, this is a committee request, of each agency and all of their vacant positions. We got that last year, and we don't have that. So I know that we have a spreadsheet of all the ones that you've cut. I'm just curious in terms of all of them, so I appreciate that. And I also want to make sure that it's done for every agency. It seemed to me like the police department, it was much more of a moving positions around between services as opposed to actually saying, hey guys, you haven't filled your spots. Like what is happening here?
So just really quickly, so BPD is a little different. I'll let Bob go into the specifics, but because of the consent decree, any wholesale changes, especially to positions in BPD, because, obviously we have a strength and force number that we need to try to hit, and that's also outlined in the consent decree, we would have to take to Judge Berdar. And so we would not be eliminating any sworn positions. Now, what we have done in BPD over the past few years is our civilianization effort. And so we have been transitioning some of those positions into civilian positions, but that's why you don't see like large cuts to BPD. But Bob, if there's anything additional, you can add it.
There are some positions that were eliminated that are civilian. They're not sworn. But so I did see that there's positions that are moved between services too. Like there was 90 positions taken away from one service and put into another service. It just seems like we're moving people around as opposed to actually trying to get those positions filled. Or are we trying to get them filled by having different duties like detectives versus patrol officers?
They are trying to get them filled. I mean, I'll defer to police when they come in, but just more broadly, the exercise was, we looked at positions that have been vacant for long periods of time, greater than 2 years, greater than 3 years. The reason we generally don't abolish sworn positions in that exercise is because if you abolish a sworn position, you end up paying overtime for it. And, both police and fire have staffing models about how many units they have in service or how many people they staff, which I think deserves, a conversation about what those levels are and what they should be. But if you just eliminate them based on that exercise and you don't have them, you end up paying overtime. With the civilians, it's a little bit different because you do have some positions, especially in like CUB and MAPS, I would say, that are not tied to kind of some operational plan out there that if they've been vacant for a long time, it kind of suggests, it doesn't mean we're certain, but it kind of suggests like maybe this position just is not needed anymore, it needs to be reclassed. So the ones that we did take were largely civilian positions, which we can provide a list, which you might have. We did provide a list on current, just to be clear, for the hearing, I guess it was 2 to 3 weeks ago about vacancies and overtime, we did provide a committee request about all the positions, like all city positions and how long they've been vacant. So
That's the list I'm looking for.
We can get that to you.
If the committee has it, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, we can get that to you or make sure it gets to you.
Okay.
So we did
Yeah,
provide
I'm
that
not on
list.
the committee, so I didn't get it, but I just want to make sure that we get
And in
that.
that list, many of the ones that show up this year as still vacant for greater than 3 years are the ones that were eliminated. It mostly lines up, not perfectly, but it mostly lines up. And I just want to say that we don't have a hard and fast rule that if it's vacant for more than 3 years, it's definitely gone. There's still some discretion used where we say, oh, somebody might be in the middle of recruiting for that position or they have a candidate. But a lot of times it's a good indicator that those are the ones we should start our search for and see if they're worth eliminating and then redirecting the savings to other priorities.
Yep, and again, can I just do another through line here to the question that I got from the council president, as well as what you're now talking about with the abolishing vacant positions and bringing more work in-house. So oftentimes, like what we find with positions that have been vacant for like 3 years, for example, like I think our signal technicians, right, or our carpenter might have been vacant for a number of years. What we find is that we may need to upgrade that position, reclassify it, modernize the position, or what have you, right? And so there's, again, this fine balancing act of abolishing the position because it's set vacant for a number of years and or bringing that work in-house. Because if we go around and we abolish the positions that have been vacant 2 years, 3 years, that doesn't mean that we don't need that position to provide the service if we want to be able to do the service in-house. And so, to the council president's point about a roadmap and, doing this work strategically, it is this fine balance of when do you cut and abolish that position when you know that you need those positions to do the work in-house. And so that's the complicated type of analyses that we're doing through some of the staffing studies that we're doing now. And one of them is starting with DOT.
I appreciate that because I know we did the salary study and we did all of those things to try to figure out, there might be some positions to abolish that then we combine the salary to be able to make, so yes. I get that that's part of the exercise and I appreciate that. And, I just think that in future budgets, having a little bit more detail about what that looks like like would be super helpful. And then on the level of service for police and fire, so fire has been doing a lot.
Councilwoman, I'm sorry. I'm just gonna, we have to move along.
Oh, so we only get one question?
One question.
That I'm in
For
the middle of my.
for non-committee members, one question, one follow-up.
Oh, okay, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no worries.
I'm sorry. I have another question, but I'll take it next.
Councilman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, that one works. Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you again for the opportunity to have this conversation. I just wanted to, I know we'll have a chance to chat under MOAD later on, but just while we're here with the folks in the room right now, maybe this is specifically for Bob, but it could be somebody else. As we think, I know we spent a lot of time last year prioritizing, in our conversations, prioritizing YouthWorks funding. This will be my second year as a YouthWorks parent and like my 10th year as a YouthWorks site supervisor, so I incredibly supportive of the program and know what a big impact it makes, not only for our young people, but for our communities, our nonprofits, and all the rest. Always glad to see that it's robustly funded. Just wanted to parse out, I know there's a lot of funding streams to go into it. Those have changed a lot over the years as we try to do everything we can to make sure we're taking care of our young people, which I know is a huge priority for all of us here. The line, right now the mix is general funds, a very robust amount of general funds, really, I'd love to see that. Federal, state, and then special is $5.5 million. Remind us what special means in this context, or what it could mean, because I know there'll be special will show up throughout this book. So specifically to this, or just in general, what are we trying to convey when we say special?
So yeah, special funds are generally either grants from private organizations, or it's money in what we call a special fund that's earmarked for a particular purpose. So just an example, like the Children and Youth Fund is considered a special fund in our budget because it's earmarked, it's legally restricted for certain purposes. But special as a category also includes private grants. In that particular item, I would need to check with MOED because under that special category, there could be multiple grants or private sources of fundraising or asks from the community. So we'll need to get back to you on that. They'll come prepared to their hearing to explain the sources, but it would be best if I check with them so we don't give you incorrect information.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Blanchard.
Here it is. That's good.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam CA, the LPRs obviously would be a really very empowering tool for our traffic enforcement officers, and it allows them to be more efficient, it allows them to do the job cheaper, it allows them to do the job in a way that is safer and usually, I think, more comfortable for a lot of our traffic enforcement officers. So I'm really excited about this technology. We've been talking for the year and a half that I've been on the council about getting state legislation to enable us to mail tickets. Can you please talk through, or can anyone talk through where the status of that looking ahead to the 2027 General Assembly session is, to getting that enabling legislation that we need so those tickets can be mailed instead of forcing the traffic enforcement officers to stop the car, get out of the car, and go and write it.
Oh, so thank you so much for that. I just had this conversation recently. We may have had it in here. I'll let MOGR talk about that, but that is a top priority for me because that is going to make our traffic enforcement officers so much more effective and efficient if they are able to if we're able to mail those tickets, if they're able to scan those plates, get that information and then mail the tickets. Also, which I know we're going to talk about overnight enforcement at some point, we have very serious safety challenges that exist, for our entire workforce, but using TOs as an example, In my opening remarks, I did mention Mr. Turnipseed, but he was a traffic enforcement officer that got assaulted while on the job doing work for the citizens of Baltimore. And so we do have to be thoughtful about the safety of our TOs. And if they don't have to get out of their vehicle to issue those tickets, then they're better positioned to serve the residents without compromising their safety. So that is a top priority. The other thing, too, we actually sent a group to Pittsburgh a couple weeks ago. OPI went alongside DOT. Their entire, the majority of their operation is LPRs, and they were able to reduce kind of the size of their workforce and increase like their I think they have 10 LPRs if I'm not mistaken, and they're just they're able to like double the amount of tickets that they issue in comparison to ours because of the fact that they can just scan with the LPR and mail to someone's house. So it's a top priority, but I'll have Nina, because I think there may have been a bill before, but Nina can talk through the specifics.
Good afternoon, Councilman. I'm so happy to engage with you on this subject again. Just an overview of our process as we gear up for the 2027 session. Typically, we engage with agencies across the city beginning next month. End of June is when we start our process for asking for requests from agencies. This has been a request that was under consideration in previous years. There were a few more data points that we needed to pull together, which the city administrator kind of outlined in her summary. So once we have the list of items that we're going to be moving forward with for the mayor's consideration for the upcoming General Assembly session, those will be narrowed down and finalized, and we'll also do some cross-jurisdictional engagement to determine whether it's something that we want to see authorized for the city alone, or whether it's something that we would want to see authorized statewide, where we could have a whole coalition of people together asking for the same authorization. So we're happy to keep you updated on the process, but as I said, this was an item that has previously been considered by the administration. Obviously, priorities each year have to be weighed on an individual year basis. But as this has been a priority of the city administrator and mayor in the past, I think that there's a very good likelihood that we'll see this as one of the mayor's priorities for next year.
Can I give you a quick data point? The deputy mayor just passed me a note. It's kind of embarrassing. So, but it's the point about why this is so effective. So when we went to Pittsburgh, they are able to issue 500 tickets per TO per shift. When you compare that to us, it's 30. So that's why LPRs and tickets by mail are so important to get done.
I had a follow-up question, but that actually is, I think, better than what I was going to say. I'll just make the comment that I know at least one delegate who has been a thorough, I think, ally to the mayor in the legislative process, is very interested in this legislation, but I don't think any member of our delegation is going to want to move forward on something like this without really clear guidance, because it's such a technical, like, administrative thing. So it is going to take, I think, leadership from the administration on this one. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And we are going to close out this with Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. I just want to, hopefully nobody else has any other questions. I wanted to ask about, just following up on the staffing issue. One of the things that came up earlier in the hearing in our day was two examples, and maybe there's 3 and 4, where there's in the book certain number of positions, and then in the description that there's more positions that are going to be added. We did get the explanation from finance that the ones that are stated under 2027 are the ones that are actually for sure, and the other ones have not, the ones in the descriptions have not been classified yet. My worry about all of this is it takes a really long time to go through class and comps and all the other processes to go through in order to classify positions and hire people. So when we're saying that we want additional positions at MEMA for, I'm just using that as an example, or, BBMR, who says that they're adding a position that because they weren't classified in the budget, that then it's going to take another 6 months to hire. And I think that, and maybe this is a DHR question, but I think we need to think about what are the ways that, if people are interested in working for the city, like they want to work for the city and they want to do it now. And we want them here, particularly those that are transitioning from the federal government, like let's hire them all. But we can't do that in 6 months. And so this is an example of, the process that was spelled out to us was, that the agencies are supposed to be able to classify prior to having it in the budget, and if it's not there yet, at least put it in the description, which is fine. But that doesn't help us with really understanding what the staffing is, A, and B, it doesn't give me, like in DHCD was given, $1.3 million last year, and it took them 6 months to hire. And so I just want to make sure that when the council is passing a budget that says we are, because of the mayor's expectations and that we agree with, because that's basically what the budget is saying, that we're actually doing the jobs immediately. We're not waiting another 6 months to be able to hire.
So I think that's good feedback, and we take that feedback. I think a couple of things, and the reason why we've done it in this way in the past couple of years is one, we want to give the agencies flexibility and the time to do the assessment needed to determine what positions they actually need. And so, that's why we give them, hey, here's $1 million so that you can then go out and create the positions that you need to create versus us, kind of force fitting that in and determining the classification in the budget ourselves. And so I think a couple things will help us get ahead of this next year. So I talked about the staffing study that we're doing in parking enforcement at DOT. That staffing study will spit out some information and it will tell us the types of positions that we need, and that should then inform the DOT budget in that next year because we will have the staffing study. That's what we did with the Rubicon report in DPW. We knew the type of positions that we needed to create. And so hopefully the staffing studies will help us get ahead of that, and then we can actually create those positions in the budget. And I saw Bob, you came off because he wanted to add something else.
Yeah, just one thing to add. When an agency has funding in the budget, there's nothing that stops them from working on that, even prior to the beginning of the fiscal year, start to work on that with DHR. We have to wait until July 1st to actually make the decision because, there could be changes that the council makes or there could be transfers. So we want to be respectful of the process and not start something before the budget is actually passed. But to the CA's point, too, on the timing, there's a pretty quick turnaround between when we make final budget decisions. We're generally going through this with the mayor and his team at the end of February, even into early March, and we're giving the agency the notice that say, hey, you've gotten funded for this. And then from there, we've got about a three-week turnaround time before the preliminary budget goes out to the public. So there are times, as the CA said, that we say, okay, we're agreeing to fund a certain amount of money because we think this is a priority, but you need to quickly turn around and figure out what those positions are that you need classification, work with DHR. But if we don't have that information yet, that's the time when we put that in the budget, just as a dollar amount rather than the actual FTEs.
So I thought that the agency the department starts the budget process in September. You give yourself a little bit of a break between budgets and budgets, but then, you ask for all the agency's budgets, then, you make some decisions, and you ask for enhancements. I guess I thought that all of this was planned ahead of time, as opposed to saying, here's another $1 million, figure out what you're gonna do with it, which doesn't seem very strategic to me. But it could say, on the opposite side, hey, DHCD, for instance, we need you to do X, Y, and Z. Here's $1 million to do it. You need to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
So I see where both can happen, but I thought all that was happening like during the budget process.
It does to some degree, but the final decisions don't get made yet generally until that end of February or early March time period. So I think one thing that, we take as feedback out of this is that we could give agencies guidance and say, look, if you're asking for additional funding or enhancement, it has to include at least a proposal or, some kind of, design around what those positions would look for. Sometimes we just get a request that says, we need 5 positions to do something, and they haven't kind of put it into the format that it would be acceptable to HR. So I think coming out of this, because this issue has come up a couple times over the past few years, and I think the best we can do here is give guidance to agencies to kind of strengthen those proposals and have that information so that we can put it in the budget very specifically. But again, to the CA's point, you want to leave some flexibility, especially on kind of later decisions where we say, okay, we need to invest some money in this service. We know there's a need. We know there's, positions needed, but we're not quite sure yet what that looks like. And in those cases, that's when we've kind of dropped that dollar amount in there. But again, that doesn't stop, like right now, for the agencies that have penny personnel in their budget, that doesn't stop them now from doing the work. And then it's just got to wait until the budget passes to ensure that the funding is still there. And then they can get that to HR and start hiring right away.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's some priorities that we lay out and that the mayor lays out that, we know we need more capacity, especially with all the oversight hearings that we have. We know that we need more people in permitting. We need more people in inspectors. We need all of this. So it seems to me like there's a lot more planning already involved.
If I could just, on behalf of DHR, again, Shamaya Kearney, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer. So I think there is a balance between providing a level of flexibility to agencies, but then there's also the desire by DHR to not have to have as many class and comp requests, right? And so to the extent that we can develop some of the parameters as a part of the budget process, it does then lessen the number of class and comp requests that come to DHR. So right now, there's probably anywhere from 25 to 50 class and comp requests that come through to DHR a month. If we establish some of the guidance that Bob just referenced as a part of the budget process, that would then decrease the amount of time that it would take to go through that process. So not everything has to go through ECC if it is a part of the budget. The other side of that too is just the structure of that process. So right now, the agencies have to submit their documentation to DHR almost 2 months in advance. There's a lot of back and forth that may happen between an agency because their information isn't complete, or there may be some questions from class and comp. That takes some time to go back and forth with one another. Then it has to actually go to the ECC for vote. Then it has to go to the BOE. And so all of that increases the amount of time that it takes to hire. So I just wanted to be clear also to the public what that process is. It's not just that DHR is not moving fast enough. The process inherently creates a time lag. And so there are some conversations that I'm having with Director Falcon at this time about what we can do to streamline some of those ECC processes.
Yep.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, DCA Kearney. We are going to go into recess, and we will resume our next hearing at 3:55. Thank you, everyone.